brought to you by L.I.V.E products. L.I.V.E, live now, we're live now. And all praise be to the Most High God. The Most High God comes first. So I'm going to talk a little bit about DC Marvel. See, Warner Brothers, for the longest while, has been chasing Marvel, not because they just want to chase Marvel and get their success, which is one of the things they want to do. It's because they also ultimately want to have a DC Marvel crossover so that they can have Marvel characters in the DC universe and DC characters in the Marvel universe. And that gives a potential for unlimited storytelling. They've wanted this since 2011. The whole idea behind forming universes was so that you could cross them over. And so that's why Kevin Feige keeps on saying a win for DC is a win for Marvel, blah, 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 blah. Now, for the longest while, since 2004, Warner Brothers has been thinking about starting a universe, a DC universe. The crossover thing started to happen after, I believe it was, they tried unsuccessfully with Green Lantern to start a DC universe, and Marvel successfully had basically a ensemble with Avengers, in which they successfully were able to bring a team together. Thor, Iron Man, which was a very little known Marvel character I knew, the Hulk, uh, Captain America, and then again Black Widow, which is another character from Marvel I didn't really know about. Now, all the people post 2012, there are a lot of Marvel fans today versus DC fans because I grew up on DC, but of course, DC in my time was from I started off in the 70s and then in the 80s, late 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, right? So I was of that era growing up on DC, and some of you were, and some of you are not. Some of you grew up in the era from the 2010s. So some of you knew about Man of Steel because you grew up and you saw Man of Steel, and that's how you're a DC fan. And you may have seen some of the DC animated films and DC animated series, and you would have the CW. But I grew up in a different time. So what Zack Snyder was doing appealed to me because of all the DC lore that I grew up under, from the late 70s to the early 80s to the 90s to the 2000s. You know, of course, the 2010s and onwards is where Zack Snyder came into the picture. So when Zack Snyder did Man of Steel and Christopher Nolan got Zack Snyder to do Man of Steel, which was David Goyer's take on Superman, um, it really, really appealed to me. You have to understand something. Superman 1978, for me, is an outdated thing. I can see the quality in the film. I don't really like it. When I break down and I think about what Superman was doing with Lewis and stuff, I don't really appreciate it. Okay? But there are a lot of elements to that Superman movie which are definitely Superman like, and I enjoyed certain elements of the movie, even though it's a very dated film. You go and watch it now, and it's very dated. Okay? Um, but since then, having seen Superman comics and how it evolved from Super Friends to we had so many cartoons back in the day that were had their own superhero kind of vibe to them. Thundercats, and Thundercats kind of revolutionized the game in terms of animation. Animation itself has evolved quite a lot as well. So the evolution of the character was so much more. So when you got to like the Adventures of Superman and Superman the animated series and Batman the animated series, it took the characters into a much more daring, adventuresome, sort of almost filled with danger sort of storylines, and this is what opened our minds. And the guy who really started this triggered this change has never done a comic book movie since. His name is Tim Burton. Tim Burton has so much to be credited for how not just Batman, but how the depiction of Superman, how the superheroes got more dangerous. The stories became more dangerous. If you go and watch Super Friends, Um, the old Superman friends from the 70s and 80s, there isn't really any much danger stakes, you know. And to me, or you watch it, Batman and Robin from Batman 1969. Again, not really much stakes, not much danger. And to me, that's what Marvel movies have become. That's what DC movies have become. And for some reason, they've gone back to that time and they have tried to roll back, shall we say, the time. And there's no real stakes, there's no real danger in these movies. And I feel like Superman 2025, Aquaman 2, I'm talking DC right now, Blue Beetle, The Flash, Shazam 2, Wonder Woman 1984, The Suicide Squad, Birds of Prey. I feel Justice League 2017. I feel like those movies had very little stakes in them, very little danger in them, and they played out like Super Friends, or they played out like Batman 1966. They're goofy, they're campy, they're funny, uh, and there's no real stakes. There's no real villain. And if you look at Marvel movies, it's the same thing. The villain's weak in most of the Marvel movies. Um, the best villain they had was you had Thanos. He was okay. Who else? The guy in Black Panther, he was all right as well. Um, the head of the Secretary of State in The Winter Soldier. You can pick them off, off your fingers. They're not. Most of the villains are not threatening. There's no stakes in the movies or Marvel movies, and all of these. What I'm trying to say is all of these things harrow back to Super Friends, and before Tim Burton came on the scene. Tim Burton changed the game, and the animators who animated for Batman the animated series, uh, their animation style, first of all, was incredible for the time. I was there, and there were stakes in it. Like people died in the animated films, just like how people died in the Tim Burton Batman 1989. Okay. And then in Batman 1992, which is Batman Returns, the stakes were ramped up even more, and more people died. And it was even more graphic, you know? And the point I'm making is that, unfortunately for Tim Burton, Warner Brothers did not go with him. Because I would have loved to see what he would have done with Nicolas Cage and with the Superman, right? That he was going to present. And yes, Tim Burton's kind of dark. But the point I'm making is that Tim Burton changed the game, both in animation and in terms of movies. You could have edgy superhero films. In fact, when Batman, which the theme, everybody loves that Batman theme for some reason. Dum 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 dum. Whereas Superman's theme, or at least the popular Superman theme, is dum ba da 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 ba 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 bam bam ba da, right? So it's almost like Tim Burton and the guy who composed, they came up with a kind of slightly sinister, very kind of horror movie like theme, and it just changed everything because the way how Batman was seen before was campy and a guy who kind of obeyed the law. It's kind of like Superman, right? And he didn't infringe because 1966 Batman changed the way how Batman was viewed. Before that, the number of films or even TV shows that had Batman, he was this creepy, creature of the night kind of guy, worked underneath the radar. But then you had Batman, the campy series, which had Robin, and he was teaching Robin, and you have to. He was law abiding. Like, how does a vigilante become law abiding? I don't know, but he was law abiding in that he wouldn't cross the road without making sure that the traffic light was on green and all kinds of stupid things. So it really, Batman 1966 sort of just totally went another direction with Batman. And it was successful because it was goofy. It was the 60s, the 70s, groovy, dancing. Batman used to dance a lot and all that. It was just really, it was a parody of Batman, to be honest with you, because Batman's not that. But it worked. And that brought about Super Friends. And Super Friends, the Batman there was more of a detective, just like the Batman in 1966 was more like a detective. So it was very campy. Super Friends was not as campy. It was actually not as jokey. The villains were villains, but it was very simple. It was straight cut, straightforward. The animation reminded me of the early Scooby-Doo films. Scooby-Doo, again, being a detective, it was slightly creepy, it was slightly weird. Well, Super Friends was something like that, right? Hanna-Barbera was doing the animated series for these things. But that animated style changed. And after Tim Burton did Batman 1989, I believe Batman the Animated Series came out, I think, in 1990 or 1991. And it was a totally different style of doing animation. And they carried it back. It's almost like the world that they were in was more of the 1940s, the 1930s. With vehicles and stuff, the design and the buildings were Tim Burton like. The buildings are very, very tall and gothic. And Batman, which was played by he's now deceased. I forgot what his name is. You guys probably can tell me what his name was. Um, Holy shit! Look how much people are watching this stream. That's cool. Anyway, wait a minute. Hold on. Where am I? Hold on 1 second. I just want to see something. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I was saying that yeah, he changed the game. Tim Burton changed the way how now, mind you, Tim Burton was borrowing from another guy who changed the game, which was Frank Miller. So this is a very important point that everyone needs to understand because history gives you context, and context is very important for what I'm about to say. Now, with respect to uh, Tim Burton, so Batman was the Batman the Animated Series was based off of Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. The animation was different. The stories, while fast, because I think they were 45 minutes long to an hour, or even 30 minutes. I think I can't remember, but the stories were interesting, and always there was danger. And then the orchestration was great, and the stories were very mysterious and interesting, and it had the detective drama in it, but at the same time it had the danger because of the explosions, innocent people getting injured and stuff like that. So it was a more well-rounded, well-crafted thing. That's why Batman the Animated Series is still seen as one of those great classics for you to go back and watch. Anyways, so my point being that the character moved from being campy and funny, even though the character originally wasn't campy and funny, right? Tim Burton kind of carried Batman back to his origins, what Bill Finger and I forgot what the other guy's name is. That's crazy. You guys can correct me on that. Bill Finger and the other guy did. Why can't I remember the other guy's name? You usually forget Bill Finger's name. He was the illustrator. The guy actually wrote the dialogue and stuff. I forgot what his name is. That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, forget it. Anyway, so what does this have to do with anything? We'll get there. We'll get there. Trust me, we'll get there. So it's important to understand this history. Tim Burton changed the way how DC portrayed its characters. He changed it fundamentally in terms of look, feel, storytelling. Because Superman, the animated series, came afterwards. And again, there were stakes. Superman got beat up sometimes. Sometimes you didn't know if he was going to live or die, or the people of Metropolis were going to live and die. It was so dangerous. It was so adventuresome, mysterious. There was some detective work. And at the same time, it was kind of treacherous. It was kind of perilous. And the music followed that, you know? And that's what made these animated series, day-to-day animated series, and also the short stories. You know, Warner Brothers had Off the Lot, which was some short stories on Superman Red Sun and Superman and Brainiac. And they were all perilous. They were all interesting. And the way how the music played and everything was just fantastic. Then we went into the animated films. You know, you all know about Mask of the Phantasm. And you know of, these are the early ones. These are the early ones. Mask of the Phantasm. We had what's the other one? Batman Arkham Asylum, and I cannot remember this Batman one. This is with Jason Todd. You guys know the name. Jason Todd, Bruce Wayne, Ra's al Ghul. Jason Todd comes back from the dead, and he why can't I remember his name? Why? I'm drawing a blank anyway, but you guys know it. It's a very well-known one. Yeah. And the point behind it is this. And then, of course, much later on, we had The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Part 1 and Part 2. The Dark Knight Returns, Part 1 and Part 2. Anyway, the point I'm making is they got rid of the guy, and we must never forget this. Tim Burton is the guy that changed the game, not just for Batman, but for how these comic book characters were portrayed in DC. I cannot speak for Marvel, but I can speak for DC. And we owe a lot to Tim Burton. You know, people say, well, Tim Burton didn't follow the comics perfectly, and, you know, Frank Miller didn't really like Tim Burton's take on Batman, and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, while Frank Miller was responsible for kind of carrying Batman back to his origin somewhat with The Dark Knight Returns, do understand that it was what the fuck? Tim Burton. I can't remember the name. Why am I slipping? Why is my memory so bad? Tim Burton, who brought back, who made Batman, and not just Batman, but by extension, how DC animation was done, and even how storytelling was done. He sort of affected all of that through his movie Batman 1989 and then Batman 1992. And I really love Batman 1992. I think Risha Pfeiffer's portrayal of Catwoman is still one of the. I think she's a better Catwoman than the young lady who played Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises. I think she was a better Catwoman. I also think she's the best Catwoman out of all the Catwomen I've seen, because she mixed up the sensualism of Catwoman. I know it's more what's the word I'm looking for? Unrealistic, her Catwoman. But still, I like it because it's amazing. People talk about James Gunn being comic booky, but the weirdest thing is I think Tim Burton, of all the iterations of comic book movies I've seen out there, has been the most comic book movie director I've ever seen when it comes to Batman, because the Batmobile looked like straight out of a fucking comic. I mean, anyway, what is the best looking Batmobile you will ever see put to film? It is Tim Burton's Batmobile. It's not Zack Snyder's Batmobile. Zack Snyder's Batmobile is cool, but it's not that. It's Tim Burton. It's so fucking comic booky, and they literally translated that Batmobile into Batman the Animated Series Batmobile, right? Because Tim Burton they fucking got it, man. They designed the best Batmobile you'll ever see for Batman. In my opinion, that's the best Batmobile I've ever seen. And it's, to this day, I hands down, it's Tim Burton's Batmobile. And how long has it been? In 1989 to now is how many years? How many years is that? Right? That's like what, 30, 36 years? It's been 36 years, and that fucking Batmobile still is, in my opinion, the iconic Batmobile to this day. That's my opinion, of course. You guys may differ. But I truly believe that Tim Burton set the tone for Batman, but he didn't just set the tone for Batman. He also set the tone for what DC would look like in terms of live action film, and animation, right? And even comic books were influenced by him. Because yes, Frank Miller influenced the comic books, but he kind of reinforced what Frank Miller said. And this is the power of film. This is what film can do. Film can affect canon. Film can affect how people view characters if they take to them and if it appeals to them. Film can actually do that as well, you know? So anyway, I wanted to say that. So when anybody says the name Tim Burton, and by the way, last year, I think it was, Tim Burton was very successful with his Beetlejuice movie, by the way. Just saying. Tim Burton just keeps on hitting you with home runs. Tim Burton's a home run guy, okay? When it comes to doing a sort of weird, sort of dark, kind of horror-like take on things, Tim Burton's your guy, okay? And I was still kind of interested to see what Tim Burton would do with Superman, to be honest with you. I think that project being canceled is a disservice to Tim Burton. And yes, I know Andy Muschietti, he was trying to give a tribute to Tim Burton, but you didn't even involve Tim Burton in that. Tim Burton didn't have nothing to do with that. You see what I'm saying? How can you give a tribute to Tim Burton and Tim Burton's not a part of the tribute? Like, fuck out of here. You know what I'm saying? And Tim Burton is the one, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Batman 1989 was so successful, it cost $15 million to do that movie at the time. I don't know what inflation is now, okay? It made $450 something million. I think it was 458 off of $15 million. It was a tremendously successful film for its time. And why did it get such a response? It was because he dealt with Batman in a way at the time that it didn't capture what Frank Miller was doing, because he wasn't trying to be like Frank Miller, but he was inspired by Frank Miller. But a much more mature take on the character and some sort of depth to him. Okay, I'm not saying it was extremely deep, no, but it had some sort of depth to it. And then the other thing that was really extraordinary about it was the world he created, how he created Gotham, what he made Gotham look like. And yes, Gotham was in the 80s. You had the 80s cars and stuff moving around, but the Batmobile and sometimes the way how people spoke was like from the 40s, you know? So he kind of clashed. It was almost like he was trying to do the classic Batman comic, you know, the original Batman comic from the 1930s, but yet he was giving you an 80s spin on it, a contemporary spin on it. And to me, in a dark way, because the humor, everything about it is dark. And yes, people die in that thing. And yes, people kill people in that thing. There's murder, all kinds of stuff going on in there. And I love that because Gotham was a dirty town, right? So for the first time, we get a depiction of Gotham that feels like Gotham, because Gotham wasn't a clean place. It was corrupt, right? And so I really enjoyed the fact that Tim Burton brought to life, because Batman 1966 is not, Batman ain't existed in Gotham, okay? That's a parody, right? People love Adam West, you know, because it was light and funny and whatever. But you can't do that today. You can't, because Tim Burton set a standard. And after that, you know, like a lot of people say Zack Snyder ruined DC. In a way, he kind of did, but not really. I'm going to explain. And same thing for Tim Burton. You could say Tim Burton ruined DC in the sense that in a kind of way, DC couldn't go back to doing campy. DC couldn't go back to doing Adam West films anymore. After Tim Burton let the cat out of the bag, it was sort of like you couldn't, certain things you just couldn't do with Batman anymore. It was kind of like that. And while you can get away with it in the Lego movies, you can't really get away with it just like that, with anything just like that. You know, the Lego movies are a parody of the Justice League, right? It's a parody, right? Because they're Lego, right? Superheroes are not in Lego. So Lego gets away with anything because Lego could be anything, right? So it was a clever way to do the campy version of these characters, the Looney Tune, the wacky version of these characters, because it was all in Lego. And because it's in Lego, they're not human beings. And because they're not human beings, you can get away with anything. So that's how they were able to do that campy stuff. But you can't go doing campy. You can't go doing camp in DC just like that. You can't. But I'm going to show you how you can do camp and humor and jokes with DC and get away with it. I'm going to show you how. And you'll see. But yeah, in a way, Tim Burton and Zack Snyder kind of ruined, and even Christopher Nolan kind of ruined DC in the sense that you can't just go and do any old DC movie with certain characters particularly, right? You can't just change them up. And that's another reason why Superman, and I'll tell you, there's another thing I need to say about it. Because everything has to be in context so you can understand. And once you get this context, it's going to make sense why what I'm about to say works and will work, right? So, yeah, Burton set the tone for what DC was supposed to be. You know, some of y'all don't like Tim Burton. That's okay. James Gunn doesn't like Tim Burton, okay? He doesn't like his movies. But I'm going to tell you this. Tim Burton was a visionary. Okay? Danny Elfman was a visionary. The music that Tim Burton works with Danny Elfman a lot. Danny Elfman and Tim Burton were visionaries in the sense that what they brought to the table was something different. It wasn't a parody because the characters were the characters. There was humor in his dark movies because Tim Burton's known for humor, dark humor in all his films. There's always a humorous aspect to it. So Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, they brought about this Batman. And then from there, now we go to animated series. And from the animated series, it breeds a Superman animated series, which everybody loves. They love that Superman animated series because now they've taken, Bruce Timm takes the Superman figure. He applies a similar formula to Superman as Batman. There's this, you know, the intrigue, the mystery, you know, the peril, you know, the danger, you know, it's an adventure, but it's an adventure series. So the music is now a little bit different, right? It's almost like, it's kind of like Superman 1978, kind of, but not really. This Superman's a lot more tougher. He's a lot stronger. It's a lot more dangerous. The story's more developed. You know, there's still the aspirational trumpet sound. The superhero, it's still in there, but it's different in the sense that the elements that they used for Batman, the animated series, are now in it, right? So they take what Richard Donner did with Superman to some degree. They take what Superman is from the comics, where the comics have reached. Remember, Dan Jurgens' run has started to happen, right? Death of Superman, all of this stuff is going on. And so, because Superman's comics wasn't selling, so they decided, oh, we're going to kill off the character, right? So Dan Jurgens does Death of Superman comic, right? And that jars everybody. And now everybody wants to know what happened to Superman. Is he going to die? Is he going to stay dead? Blah, blah. And that boosts a whole bunch of comic book sales, right? But in the midst of that, what we have is we have a situation where Superman is being brought, the animated series of Superman, at least in, I believe it's the early 2000s, is coming out there. Superman, the animated series. I don't know if they introduced him first if he first shows up in Batman. I can't remember. Of course, they changed Batman as a character as well. They changed his appearance and look. They start to modify him and change him as well in the animated series. But I can't remember they introduced Superman in Batman or what. But I do know this. Superman came out, the animated series, and then we had Justice League that came out after, right? And Justice League killed it. Everybody loved to watch Justice League and the adventures that went with it, because it's all about adventure, right? And we had a set of movies in between where we had the DCAU, the DC Animated Universe that was formed, right? Because of Justice League. So you have to ask yourself this question, all right? Ask yourself this question. DC's evolving. Meanwhile, Marvel's also evolving, right? Marvel started off pretty dark. We had a couple of Spider-Man movies. We had a couple of Flash movies. We had a Captain America movie. And that's back in the 70s and the 80s. We had those going on. We had the animated G.I. Joe series. We had, what do we have? I didn't really follow Marvel that much. I did read a couple of comic books, but I believe they also had things like, I don't remember seeing any Avengers series. I remember, what was it? What we had Incredible Hulk on TV. That was a big thing with not Bruce Banner but David Banner. That was a series, and then they ended up with a movie. I think it was somewhere in the 80s. The last movie of the Incredible Hulk came out. We had Spider-Man. Spider-Man had been around forever, right? We had movies with Spider-Man before, even before we're talking about way before Blade and all these things, and Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. Even before all of that, there were Spider-Man movies before. I remember Electric Company, which was a Saturday morning program. We have a little Spider-Man segment in there. You had Spider-Man. You had Spider-Man animated stories, right? I'm trying to think of what else. Hulk. I know Hulk. Do I remember any Hulk? I can't remember seeing anything with Hulk. I can't remember seeing anything with Hulk. I can't remember seeing anything. Well, I didn't know anything about Iron Man. Never. I read comics with Thor and with Captain America. I read the comics, but I never saw Captain America as an animated series back, in the early times, right? I was reading those comics back in the 80s, the 90s. I was reading comics, but I can't remember if I saw any of those early morning cartoons. I know G.I. Joe was something. G.I. Joe was being shown. Now, G.I. Joe wasn't always Marvel, right? G.I. Joe, Marvel acquired G.I. Joe. But G.I. Joe, I think G.I. Joe was IDM or something like that. But anyway, G.I. Joe was something I've seen in terms of action comics. And I had G.I. Joe figures. And then, see, what else? I'm trying to remember in that time what of Marvel I actually watched at. Of course, it was Star Wars. But Star Wars wasn't Marvel, actually. Star Wars, again, was its own thing. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. That's interesting. The only comics I actually read was Spider-Man. The only comics I actually watched, or a live action film, or cartoon, was Spider-Man. That's interesting. Spider-Man was around. I don't remember any Thor stuff. I don't remember any Captain America stuff. Isn't that interesting? I know we had, in the 90s, we had a Flash TV series. And this is before the CW. I'm talking about, there was another gentleman. It was a very muscular Flash, and he used to move very fast. I remember it very well, very well. That series. Yeah. I'm trying to think of, that's an interesting thing that, DC really was the thing for a very long time. It's only of recent times, somewhere in the 2010s, that Marvel really came to the fore. And I think it's because of the Avengers movie that changed everything. And DC never got off the ground other than that. They had the Batman thing. Batman's always been there, in terms of, because again, you have to understand, Tim Burton really changed the game. Batman is so strong as a piece for DC and for Warner Brothers because of Tim Burton. And they've never given that guy his flowers, you know? They've never given Tim Burton his flowers. Tim Burton put Batman into a status greater than Superman. And the guy who made Superman tremendously profitable and the guy who made Superman tremendously popular, Richard Donner, again, they never gave him his flowers. They fired him. Guys who've changed the fucking game. Sorry about the F-bomb. Guys who changed the game out here, they constantly get screwed over by Warner Brothers or screwed over by somebody, And it's sad, because were it not for Joss Whedon, we wouldn't have the Avengers. And say what you want about Joss Whedon again. But Joss Whedon's the guy that finally got a team-up movie to work in terms of the major Marvel or DC characters. Okay? So anyway, I'm recapping this for a reason, right? So that the tone of Batman, it's hard to fuck with that. There were some animated series like Batman the Brave and the Bold, which sort of was campy, and the run wasn't as long. It was a short run. It worked. It ran for a little while, and it was canceled. But for the most part, when you talk about Batman, Tim Burton shaped the way how you see Batman today. Frank Miller and Tim Burton, they changed the way how Batman was viewed. And because of that, also changed the way how DC movies were made and brought in so many other elements to them. And then when we actually had a team up where we had Justice League, it was much, much more superior to Super Friends. The stakes were higher. The stories were more intriguing. The stories were quite intense. You really wanted to see how the stories would resolve because there's actually, what is the word I'm looking for? There was actually, it was a story. It was something written that you're looking forward to seeing how it works out. The powers that the characters had, the animation was much more dynamic. So you had that going on in the 90s and then the early 2000s. And then, of course, you had Batman, the franchise, the Warner Brothers feeling the franchise could, they were trying to get it more campy so kids could sell more toys. They said, the Batman story was too violent, whatever. And so, and to see them so hypocritical now about Peacemaker and even about Superman, what James Gunn did with Superman, it's so funny because they talk about the kids. We can't have too much violence. MPAA was, telling Zack Snyder he needed to tone down certain things because, this is a movie for children. And now look at these fucking hypocrites allowing James Gunn to curse in his movies, allowing all kinds of killing and all kinds of stuff. And just because James Gunn's kids, they're not dead in this movie. But the actions, the repercussions of that actions would be instant fatality. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's beside the point. The point I'm making is that they said Tim Burton's movies were too violent and, it's offensive to kids and selling toys. So these fucking people basically canceled Tim Burton. And of course, once Michael Keaton heard that, he was gone with Tim Burton. Just like how when the guy who played Lex Luthor, who recently died, I think it's this year, when he realized that Richard Donner was gone, he left. I forgot what his name is. I could see his face. I just can't remember his name. That's terrible. But anyway, yeah, him. Similarly, Michael Keaton was like, if Tim Burton ain't directing me, I'm gone. You know what I'm saying? He was a smart guy and it was a wise choice. He shouldn't have come back for Batman, though. That's where he fucked up. But it's okay. Michael Keaton, that is. So the question that lies before us, because I've given you so much of a preamble, the question that lies before us is this question. Yeah. Given all that history, and the tone, when deviation from the tone. So when Warner Brothers decided, okay, we want Schumacher to do Batman and Robin, and we need to go camp. We need to go all the way camp, and that didn't work. It fucking flopped, right? You know, the movie flopped. And after that, we had to wait 8 years. Interim, we had one or two really good gems. You know, we had Road to Perdition and much more serious tone DC movies with characters that we didn't really, comic books and characters that we really didn't delve into that much. But nowadays we do. And then after that, we had Constantine, and then we had Batman Begins, and that started off, again, a serious tone of DC movies with adventure and with, well, to be honest with you, I'm going to be real honest with you. Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins is still boring as fuck to me. Right? It's boring as hell to me. Constantine's more interesting, and yes, there's the devil in there and all of that kind of stuff, so I get it. But it's still more interesting to me than Batman Begins. But nonetheless, Christopher Nolan signed a deal to do 3 movies with Warner Brothers, so they went on going. And I gotta say, The Dark Knight is something. Again, the Joker that's there it's not really Joker from the comics, but it is a Joker, right? And Christopher Nolan got people to believe what he was doing with the Joker and what was happening with Batman. It was a tremendous success while all the other DC films were flopping. But most of the DC films that flopped, Superman Returns, which was not campy, but they tried to take another guy and carry on what Christopher Reeve was doing, right? Backfired royally because they were trying to focus on the romance aspect of it instead of doing some more action and seeing Superman save people and seeing Superman fix things and save things and stuff like that. They didn't do enough of that. And that movie was a flop. And of course, Jeff Johns was behind that. And then you had Jonah X, and then you had Green Lanterns 2011. Jeff Johns was behind that, and that also failed. And they thought it was the perfect, Green Lantern stuff and whatever, but it was shit. Because once again, the problem with these films is it lacked the things that Tim Burton had brought to the table. And that's what a lot of you guys don't understand. You have to get directors who can get your interest and keep your interest throughout the movie. It has to be a story that really gets you immersed into it. And Christopher Nolan was able to do that with The Dark Knight. He got you invested. Batman was kind of boring. He was kind of bland. But the Joker was not. And so when you clash those two styles together, the Joker pulled out more from Batman. And that's what made The Dark Knight what it was. The Dark Knight Rises was okay, but it was nothing like The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight was Christopher Nolan's crowning act. Thanks to Heath Ledger. That was the Batman movie that he made that was really good. And Batman wasn't great in it, okay? But Joker made Batman's that story so convincing. And the fact that, you were trying to figure out how this is going to resolve, how this is going to work out. And the fact that it ended in a tragedy also really stimulated the juices. And now that led to The Dark Knight Rises. How does Batman redeem himself? How does he come back from that? So it was really a good story in the middle of all those stories. And again, Tim Burton had always given us mystery, intrigue, suspense, adventure, right? Okay, so we go on now to Man of Steel. And Man of Steel comes off of Marvel's Avengers. And Man of Steel, what makes Man of Steel so great is this is probably the most emotional fucking movie since Spider-Man. And I'm talking about, what's his name? Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, right? Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was a heavily emotional film. The very first one was a heavily emotional film. And Man of Steel, though, comes from an emotional place that's so very real. Now, some people say that, and I've heard different takes on these things, that Zack Snyder's movies are fantastical, but they're not really realistic. I'll say this. I'll say that Zack Snyder uses what we call metaphors. iconography in certain parts of his movies, but for the most part, his films are realistic. That is, it's like you're running through life, right? You're moving through life. So, like in real time, as I'm speaking to you, this is very realistic, right? Because I'm talking and I'm a real person, and this is a real situation, and I'm analyzing something, right? But Zack Snyder would, in between that realism, throw in imagery. So he like, okay, it's like like the story where Batman, what happens? I'm trying to remember. Um, he's Bruce Wayne is he's investigating something and he falls asleep, right? So he was defragging the drive, for example, or not defragging, but breaking the encryption of the drive what Wonder Woman gave him. And then he falls asleep, and you don't know he's falling asleep until you see, you hear, and he's in this apocalyptic future, and he's he's trying to get kryptonite so he can kill Superman. He gets caught. Superman has him, he destroys his henchmen on either side, and then he kills him. But before he kills him, he tells him, Lou, you took her from me, and she was my world, right? And then he stabs him inside of his heart to rip out his heart. And as he's stabbing inside to rip out his heart, he wakes up into yet another dream or another reality where Flash is telling him, Lois Lane is the key, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, everything disappears, and then he wakes up, right? Now, the thing about that is all those dreams are metaphors. For the future, it's also a metaphor of how Batman sees Superman, and so on and so on and so on. So Zack Snyder tends to have imagery, which, when you're having the discussion about Superman as well, if, he's supposed to have all these powers, and you were seeing all these iconic images of Superman saving people on ships, Superman saving, Rocket, that was crashing, Superman, saving flood victims, and it's iconography, right? It's these iconic images. They are metaphors for what the people are discussing about him. So, in that respect, Zack Snyder is sort of figurative or metaphorical. But to say that he's not realistic, or the depiction of Superman is not realistic, is to understate it. Now, to explain what Zack Snyder does with that it's called hyper-realism, where it's supposed to convince you that this is real, even though it's not, right? So Zack Snyder, though, what he did was his emotional impact in his movies. Man of Steel is a very emotional film, right? It's about this young boy who's trying to find out who he is because he finds out that he's different to everybody else. And he uses his differences, though, usually to help people, but he's had traumatic experiences because in puberty, he has all these weird things are happening with him. And then, of course, he tries to save people, and he can do it because he's so strong. His parents are advising him not to, openly show his abilities and his strengths to the public. They're discouraging him because they don't want him to be exposed. And then his father finally explains to him why that is so. And you begin to realize how delicate this young man is, and why having such good parents it was able to sort of direct him and guide him, because they're not making decisions for him. He has to make all the decisions himself. But they're guiding him into where he is and how he comes to be. Because remember, this is an origin film. This is a film telling you how Superman comes to be. And to me, to be honest with you, Man of Steel is more interesting and gets you more involved and more absorbed in it than Batman Begins. I personally, unless you're a tremendous Batman fan, and you're only a tremendous Batman fan because Batman's been shoved down your throat for many, many years, so you kind of come to kind of understand the character. But most people who are Batman fans, they're not anything else with DC. They're big Batman fans, and Batman has a big fan base because it's been pushed for many, many years. And again, the guy who really changed the concept of Batman, made it very appealing. Even things like I'm Batman, right? I'm Batman. Tim Burton started that. Okay, Tim Burton, not Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan just brought it back to try to bring it back to what Tim Burton was doing. But even Tim Burton was much more. If you go and you watch Batman 1989 or Batman Returns, I guarantee you it's a way more interesting movie than any of Christopher Nolan's movies. I'm just going to tell you that, hands down. It's got everything when it comes to being entertaining. Okay, even though it's dated, the acting, the story, the relayance of it is way more interesting than any Christopher Nolan film. The only film that probably kind of beats it back is The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight's only The Dark Knight because of Heath Ledger's performance, in my opinion. All right. And still, you could argue that Jack Nicklaus performed better than Heath Ledger. You could argue that because Jack Nicklaus, even though Jack Nicklaus, I gotta say this, Jack Nicklaus was more like the classical Joker, but he still wasn't the classical Joker. And I'm just saying, classical Joker. I'm not talking about whether that's good or bad. Okay, Heath Ledger was way outside the realms of what Joker really is, and the classical Joker. But I think Jack Nicklaus was more hits the head on the classical Joker. That's just my opinion. You may differ in your opinion about that, and that's okay. I'm saying he's closer to it. I'm not saying he is. Right? I think that if you're looking for classical Joker, you have to go to the animated series. Classical Batman, you go to the animated series. I don't think there's any rendition of Batman where you will get the classical Batman. We haven't got that. Classical Batman is dressed in the classical Batman wear, and he conducts himself like classical Batman, right? We haven't had that depiction ever on the big screen. Not even Adam West. Adam West is a parody of the classical Batman, but he is not the classical Batman. He's dressed like the classical Batman and Robin, but he's not the classical Batman. We have not ever gotten the classical Batman. What we have gotten, though, is a comic book accurate Batman in The Dark Knight Returns Batman. We've literally got The Dark Knight Returns Batman that came on the screen, and that was with Ben Affleck's rendition of Frank Miller's very popular The Dark Knight Returns Batman. We have had that on the screen. But that is not the classical Batman, right? And why I say it's not the classical Batman in the sense that the classical Batman is Batman in his prime. And this Batman in The Dark Knight Returns is not in his prime. He is the older version of the classical Batman, but he is a much more, shall I say, battle-weary, worn down, more skeptical Batman than the classical Batman. So I hope that helps you to process this in a different kind of way. So so we haven't got the classical Batman on the screen, but I think that to make a story interesting, this is the key. When you're a storyteller, you have to make a story compelling. You have to make it interesting. And to do that, you have to be a great storyteller. I can tell you right now, Tim Burton's a great storyteller, right? You can say what you want about him. His movies have been successful because of his interesting way. Even the series, Wednesday is a hit series on Netflix, right? Tim Burton. I think Netflix removed a lot of Tim Burton stuff from it. I don't know why they are. I don't know what's the deal with Hollywood and Tim Burton, but they don't they really. And the guy just keeps on producing, and they still kind of. What's the word I'm looking for? They just keep on. I don't know why, but they keep on putting him to the fringes and trying to kick him out of the door because he's so good at what he does. He has a certain style, clearly, but he's Sleepy Hollow. I mean, this guy just kills it with it. Tales from the Crypt. I mean, you could just go on and on. Beetlejuice, Tim Burton, he's just good at what he does, right? He really is. And that's just Tim Burton. Tim Burton can do it, It's just one of those things anyway. Hollywood didn't really like Tim Burton. Okay, that's the truth. They've mistreated that guy, and that guy is what brought them the success, and they're still writing off the success of what he's done. And I just never understood it. But anyway, it actually, I should understand it, but it wasn't Warner Brothers that did it to Richard Donner. But Richard Donner again, everybody always wants to be like Richard Donner. They always want to capture that magic of Richard Donner. You know what I'm saying? And the sad thing about this is he was a visionary as well. He changed the way how special effects were used for comic book movies. And I don't get it. They mistreat the guys who really changed the game. You know what I'm saying? The game changers. And I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's a history of this has been going on. And I guess it's also been happening in Marvel because Joss Whedon changed the game, right? He was able to get this Insan movie, and he's been exiled by Hollywood. And again, I'm not saying the guy's not a piece of shit in terms of how he treats people and how he does things, but everybody's got a piece of shit in them. You know what I'm saying? This guy contributed in a major way, and he gets shit on. I'm just saying. On the Marvel end, why isn't Marvel having him do something at Marvel? I just don't, I never understood that part. So anyway, whatever. So continue on. DC, I'm speaking from a DC perspective, obviously not from a Marvel perspective. I'm not very familiar with Marvel. I know Marvel of recent times. I don't really know Marvel from way, way, way back when. I have seen some Spider-Man films, from way back in the 70s, the 80s. I've seen those. But I don't really know the history of Marvel like that. But what I could tell you is that when I look at Nolan, Burton, Donner, and then I look at Snyder. Snyder comes with Man of Steel, as I was saying before. And it's a very emotional film. I'm surprised that people say, this movie, it was dull, it was loud, and I don't understand what they're talking about, right? Because Man of Steel came from such a beautiful place. And it's so very emotional to me. It means a lot to me, even to this day. Now, I don't rank it as highly as other people rank it. Some people say, in terms of the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, they think that that's the best made DC Extended Universe DC film. I personally don't think so. My all-time favorite, obviously, in the DC Extended Universe, it is always going to be Zack Snyder's Justice League. Then next is Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition. And then you can have Man of Steel. And then I believe I'll go with Wonder Woman. And yeah, that's my top 4. Okay, I think Patty Jenkins captured things that words cannot describe. And I guess women will also explain that. And then that was also a very emotional film as well. It had me in tears a couple times. I actually cried a couple of times in Wonder Woman, which is amazing. I mean, it's an amazing movie. And yes, the ending is shit, but the movie itself and most of it was a fantastic film. And back to Man of Steel. So Man of Steel to me was a very emotional film. And the way how the actors played it off was beautiful. And the fact that Clark didn't know who he was beautiful. And the fact that he still came with this tendency to want to help people. And I don't know if that was genetic. I don't know if it's because of his father. But obviously it was cultivated by the Kents. And thank God, at certain critical points where he could have flipped and become really something dangerous and bring attention to himself in a very negative way, they were able to navigate that with him and guide him. He talks about how his mother helped him to focus. And we saw that when, again, Zack Snyder tends to go from realism into your memories. So he's in the sea. You wonder if he's drowning because he goes down with the building, right? He goes down with the oil rig, right? The oil rig collapses. He's able to hold back the thing for a minute, and he fails, and then the whole thing collapses, but the helicopter gets away. And you see him inside of the sea, and he's submerged under the water floating, and you're wondering what the fuck. So it's one of those WTF moments where you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Is he alive? Is he dead? Is this a Superman? Who is this guy? Right? Because remember, he isn't introduced as Clark in the beginning, and we know he's Clark now. But like when you're actually watching the movie and you see this guy on the ship and thing, and you say, "Is that Superman?" And in your mind, you're like, "That's probably Superman, right?" But by the time you see him, you see he has unusual abilities because he's climbing up this oil rig. He's literally, digging into the iron in the oil rig and climbing up it. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then you see he doesn't have no shirt on. His pants is in tatters. You're like, what the fuck? So obviously the elements from the oil rig burned up his clothes. He's coming into there. His whole skin, his hair, his clothes are on fire. And he goes inside the thing. He crumples the door like if it's a piece of paper. You're like, okay, this is Superman, right? Okay, he ain't normal. All that registers in your head. You see him move with super speed and try and hold back the thing, and he's grunting and stuff while they're like, man, you need to get into the freaking helicopter. Hey, man, we get out of here. And they get out of there as the thing smashes down and everything just collapses into the sea. And then you see him in the water. So, you're wondering still in your head. You're like, is he alive? Is he dead? What happened there? You get knocked out? What the fuck just happened there? Right? And then we go straight from that, which is realism, right? He's not realistic in the sense that he's super strong, super powerful, heat, fire, stuff doesn't affect him. To he's in the sea now, floating, right? And then from there now, we're seeing, obviously it's a flashback scene where he's actually dreaming. So he's dreaming in his head as he's in the water, knocked out, because he's knocked out, obviously. And he's in the water floating. And in his mind, he's gone back to, and this is where people say Zack Snyder's movies are not realistic, or the continuity, the pacing is so weird. The pacing ain't weird. It's a flashback scene. That's all it is. And it helps you to tell you about his childhood, and you're seeing it from his perspective, from him inside of his head, which is so fucking cool. And that is what gets you interested in this story. It pulls you in, because this kind of writing, I've seen it with Christopher Nolan what's the movie with shit. I'm trying to remember what the name of the movie is. Christopher Nolan's movie where you have these dreams within dreams, right? So you have a dream within a dream, right? So Zack Snyder's right now has, Henry Cavill's Superman, or he's not even Superman. He's Clark. As far as he knows, he's Clark, right? That's all he knows himself as. His identity is Clark Kent. He doesn't know. He knows he's from another planet, and he knows he has some other name, but he doesn't know what his name is and where he's from, right? So here he is. He's on this voyage to discover who he is, right? And as he's in this discovery on this fishing boat, there's a distress call. And in typical, what we will later know to be Superman fashion, he has to try and save these people. Now, the interesting thing about this call is, as the guy in the boat is saying, he's talking to the people in the helicopter about, these people who are on this rig. The people in the helicopter says, don't bother to go save them. By the time you save them, they'll already be dead. And at that point in time, Superman takes off from the boat, dives into the water and swims to the oil rig. And he's outswum. He's outswum the helicopter that's going there. Think about what I was saying to you, because you have to fill in the blanks in these movies. He swam with super speed. He's already reached the oil rig, right? And he's climbing up the oil rig, which is on fire, mind you. And he's getting to these guys, right? What's so freaking cool about this whole thing? Now you watch it, you think about it in retrospect, because obviously, as you're watching it in real time, you're trying to piece together what the story is here, right? The crazy thing about it is the stakes. The people in the helicopter that are going to try and rescue these people, they don't even believe those people on that oil rig are alive, right? The oil rig hasn't blown yet, though. So the guy who's coming with the boat and he realizes he wants to go and help, he says, by the time you get there, they will be dead. Don't worry about it. So the helicopter cruises. By the time he said they're already dead, and the guy turns around to talk to Greenhorn. That's what they nicknamed him, Greenhorn, right? Greenhorn's gone. Greenhorn's left the boat. Greenhorn's dove into the water, swam at super speed. He reached the oil rig and is climbing up the oil rig. So I just thought that was just hilarious, you know. And, you know, it's the way how they did it. And then the fact that the Betty Sue is an actual boat and that a lot of the things in Man of Steel were actual places, though some of the places are closed down now. So they used a lot of real world settings and real world stuff was going on. And, you know, the CGI was integrated into real world stuff. So you couldn't tell CGI from real stuff. I know a lot about behind the scenes of Man of Steel. So that's why I'm talking so much about Man of Steel like that. And what was so cool about that? And I hate to use the word cool because when I say cool, you take it trivially. Because Snyder always says, oh yeah, that was really cool. Everything's cool. And I know some people say cool does not equate to quality. I get you. I understand. But what I mean by cool is that insightful. Okay? I don't really mean cool. What was very insightful about that to me was the fact that Zack Snyder took all this time to bring about something and make you believe. Hyper-realism is making you believe that something that's not real is real. And you know who else deals with that? Todd McFarlane. Todd McFarlane said if he has to do Spawn, everything in the world is the same. It's normal. It's the only thing that's not normal in that whole thing needs to be Spawn. He must not be normal. And even though he's not normal, you got a question in your mind if he's normal or not. That's hyper-realism. So hyper-realism drew you into this story. They gave you this imaginary world called Krypton that felt like a real world. It felt real. That's hyper-realism. It's all about deceiving you into thinking that something is real, right? And then you see Greenhorn, who is Superman. Well, Superman 2B. He's not Superman yet. And when you see Greenhorn, he feels normal. In fact, he's just saved by another human being. So he looks normal. He feels normal. But the moment there's a distress signal that comes in and danger is sensed for some group of people, we see he's not normal, right? From the jump, from the beginning of the movie, we see he's not normal, right? We see him on fire, rip a door like if it's paper, and crumple it like paper or foil. And then he goes inside the place and leads the people out of this burning place that it hasn't blown yet. It hasn't blown up yet, right? The oil refinery hasn't blown. Leads them out. There's a helicopter coming in. Remember, the helicopter was coming in. As soon as the helicopter sees people, they made about 2 or 3 passes. On the third pass, they see some people coming out of the oil rig. And they say, hey, look, there's some people there. And they come down. They're about to leave, and they come down, and they get the people to board the thing. Of course, you could see that Greenhorn. Let's just stick with Greenhorn. That's his name. That's his alias. Greenhorn is beckoning the people to move on. Greenhorn ain't got no shirt on. He's burnt, skin looks kind of burned off, the ashes or whatever. His clothes are burned off. He looks like an Incredible Hulk, right? He looks like the Incredible Hulk, after he's come down and he's David Banner again. And then you see, as they're beckoning Greenhorn to come on a helicopter so they can get out of there, Greenhorn realizes that there's an infrastructural damage to the oil rig, and it's about to collapse. And so he jumps on and he super speed, one leap, one bound. In a single bound, he leaps buildings. In a single bound, he leaps to the oil rig, right? So you see super speed, you see him leap in a single bound, and then he blocks the thing from collapsing all the way in. And it's just enough time for the helicopter to get out of there and the whole thing collapses, right? And to me, that so intrigued me because the stakes are the people going to make it. You get that feeling of anxiousness. You get that feeling of danger. That's what's missing from these modern comic book movies. The feeling of danger, the feeling of Tim Burton's movies have it. The Dark Knight has it, right? The Dark Knight Rises have it to a certain degree. Yes, absolutely. Dark Knight Rises have it. Man of Steel has it. And it has it in various forms. It's not just the main antagonist who is General Zod. He is dangerous. He proves to be dangerous, right? He proves to be ruthless, right? But in Man of Steel, there are several different instances where there's danger. You know, you take, for instance, what's his name? Colonel Hardy, when he has to face up to Ferrora. Ferrora just blew through his whole entire platoon, right? She took out his entire platoon. She turns around and now she has to face him after his helicopter falls down. The danger, you know, he is no match for her in no way, shape, or form, right? He's in no shape or form is he a match for her. And they draw it out to the last, fraction of a second when, Kal-El comes in and just Greenhorn, aka Kal-El, comes in and just knocks her away, right? Suddenly. Because they're literally charging at each other, right? She has super speed. He has normal speed. He's no match for her. Just in no kind of way is he a match for her, right? He's got balls, but he's in no way, shape, or form. You're like, oh my God, she's going to destroy him, right? And then boom, right? Superman comes out of nowhere, boom, takes her out, right? So you have to have stakes, right? And then Hans Zimmer's way of dum 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 dum. That's General Zod's music, right? Dum 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 dum. That music, right? It amps you fucking up, right? And at the same time, this is like dum 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 dum. This is like Darth Vader's music, right? It's a march, but it's evil, right? But General Zod's music is dum 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 dum. It's almost like a Latino's version of a bullfight. You feel more like this guy, General Zod, has heroism in the midst of his evil, and he's more competitive than you think. So it feels very heroic in a very, very perverted way. It's the best way to put it, right? General Zod's music is kind of inspiring. At the same time, and it's actually a tune I'd really love to hum, which is very weird. It's kind of perverted in itself. But the thing is, what I'm trying to say to you is, dum 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 dum. That music, for some reason, feels heroic. It feels courageous. Its tone tells you that it's sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's terminal. That's the best way to put it. It's terminal. This sounds like somebody who is a kamikaze, somebody going to commit suicide, but it's heroic. Everybody's going to ram on it. Yes, you're like a martyr. Yes, go for it. That's that's the kind of music. That's how I feel about it. Right? It's very Shakespearean. It's very tragic. General Zod's music is heroic, tragic, and perverted, all in one. And that's what, to me, makes it so compelling. Danny Elfman, his music is funny, perverted, and at the same time, heroic, right? Danny Elfman, Batman's theme, this is an interesting thing. Batman and General Zod didn't have much difference between them in BVS, the Batman and BVS, and General Zod in Man of Steel. I'm now seeing this, by the way. This is a eureka moment. And the interesting thing about it, I'll explain to you what I mean, is Batman had a demented view of Superman. Now, General Zod didn't have any issue with Superman. In fact, he didn't even have an issue with humanity. His thing was that Krypton would survive by hook or by crook, by any means necessary. What made his thing demented wasn't his desire to bring back Krypton. That was nothing demented about it. It's heroic that you want to bring back your people. It's heroic that you want to make another world for your people, and you are genetically engineered to do that by any means necessary. He is a warrior, so he's going to have heroism. He's going to be courageous. He's going to take stance that may be controversial to some people, but beneficial to his people. So you can get General Zod, and he's a general, so you can get where he's coming from, especially mentally, right? Yet at the same time, the way how he carries it out, the ruthless, basically uncaring way in which he does things, like he doesn't even consider human beings worth talking about. This is not even a discussion. My priorities is Krypton. My priorities aren't Earth. How many times have we seen this in real life? Donald Trump today, I know some of you don't like what I'm about to say, but Donald Trump is like General Zod in that respect. Donald Trump thinks about himself. He thinks about America and what he deems America is, the ethnic balance of America, etc. Immigrants are coming and taking jobs from Americans and disenfranchising them. And so he sees America in a certain very narrow lens, a white place, white pilgrims. America's founded by white pilgrims. It's a white country. It's, Europeans are allowed, but people from other places like India or, Native Americans or Black people or Asians or Chinese or Mexicans, they're not Americans, really. They're not Americans, right? So he sees things through the lens of like General Zod. I'm doing this for my people. And the other people, I don't really care that much about them, And so that's why General Zod could so easily say, a foundation must be built on something. He's trying to break it to Superman in a nice way, in a dream, right? Superman is dreaming, right? And the point I'm making is that when you look at the depth to which these particular takes went, I don't have to pretend like these movies aren't deep, because they are. They just are, right? And that's the thing about Man of Steel, BVS, Zack Snyder's Justice League. In my opinion, they take the interest that Tim Burton brings to film. They take the seriousness. They take the adventure. But the adventure is tempered in the sense that it's more grounded in reality. So the journey that we get is interesting in terms of reality, meaning David Goyer, Zack Snyder, and Christopher Nolan in Man of Steel, they tell you true things. They're not just doing it for entertainment purposes. They're doing it as this is really what would happen, or this is really what happens. Like they literally, like the way how the soldiers, the American soldiers of or National Guard would deal with a threat. They literally reenacted that. The way how we used actual sailors, actual firefighters, actual oil rig workers, actual people in Sears or places that you knew, actual businesses. That Smallville is an actual place. Yes, they rebuilt it in Michigan, but it's an actual town, and so on and so on and so on. You get what I'm saying? And so I think that authenticity to reality and then pulling things from that reality that are interesting, and even clashing it with this fantasy character to make it interesting is what I think Zack Snyder was able to do with this movie. And whereas Tim Burton created an imaginary world, and it was very interesting as an imaginary world, and just the way how his lens, how he perceives things is very interesting, made for an intriguing world and an intriguing story, right? Whereas and it was much more straightforward than what Christopher Nolan, he took hard-nosed reality. Like, when you look at The Dark Knight, for example. Batman Begins is not really a big fan of it, but whatever. But The Dark Knight, what made that so great was the fact that you had a guy who had no restrictions, no boundaries, and was unpredictable, right? Joker made The Dark Knight what it was. But he was grounded in reality. Like he couldn't just do anything he wanted to do without consequence. This is the cool thing about Christopher Nolan's movies. He was showing you how Joker create this disarray, and at the same time, there were consequences to it, right? And the other thing I liked about, of course, Heath Ledger stole the show. The other thing I liked about it was how after Batman made a choice and Harvey Dent died, we saw the consequences for Batman as well. Even though it was mostly articulated with Commissioner Gordon, there were consequences to Batman having, take the blame for Harvey Dent's death, right? And I thought it was interesting. We didn't see the end point for Joker. Do you realize that? Joker was incarcerated, obviously. But even in his incarceration, he won. And that's the interesting thing about that story. And if you look at BVS, which is the second in the Snyderverse trilogy, Lex Luthor wins, right? So you see, Zack Snyder takes elements from Tim Burton, and he takes elements which have been around for a decade or so by now, and he takes elements from Nolan to give you Man of Steel and BVS. He gives you a much more, as they say, grounded take of Superman, but in the way how Bruce Timm did it, in the way how Tim Burton did it, it's a darker take. It's a more grounded take. It's a interesting, intriguing, mystery take, because there's mystery in there, right? Superman's trying to find himself, trying to find out who his family is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So there's mystery elements to it. Even with Lois Lane doing her investigation on him in Man of Steel, there's a mysterious aspect to it. We know who he is. She doesn't. She's working her way towards it, So I always found that interesting, and even how they handled Lois Lane throughout the series, I thought was also very interesting. And there's, if you do a character study on Lois Lane, which is a very interesting thing to do, she goes through a range of emotions from Man of Steel to Zack Snyder's Justice League. She goes from highs to lows. And it's really just interesting seeing her journey with Clark, in that series so far. And remember, she's got now reestablished a relationship with Clark. Clark has come back from the grave. And remember, she knows him as Clark Kent. Though the world knows him as Kal-El, she knows him personally as Clark. It's very important to understand. Kal-El and Clark. Kal-El is his real name. Clark is his Earth name. And she knows him as Clark. She does not know him as Kal-El. It's very important to understand. Right? To her, he is human. Right? So because she addresses him as a human, she addresses him as Clark Kent. You see, she doesn't know him as Superman. She doesn't know him as Kal-El. Even though he's on the balcony, he comes to her and she says this means something, and she touches the S on his chest, the glyph for hope. You have to understand, she does not know him as Kal-El. In fact, he only gets to know who he is as Kal-El. He's still growing as Kal-El. He's getting to know his own damn self as Kal-El. It's a very important point. Okay. And another thing that I think a lot of you might have passed by and haven't really looked at, and for those of you really interested in this character, it's a very important point. Between in BVS, it's very important. In BVS, we see Lex Luthor access the Kryptonian ship's archives, and he is getting updated on all the different things that had to do with Krypton and 100 million worlds. 100,000 worlds or 100 million? I think it's 100,000 worlds on my bed. What a lot of you didn't realize, and it was revealed at the end of the movie, is that Kal-El, aka Clark, has been briefed on everything that Lex Luthor knows. How do I know this? Kal-El says at the end of the movie, Wonder Woman looks at him and says, "Where did this thing come from?" And then Kal-El says, "It came from my world." How does Kal-El know that? How does Kal-El know that that thing came from his world if he hasn't been briefed on what that thing is? Right? Well, you could say what Lex Luthor said. He said, "Blood of my blood. The devil will do it." It did come from the Kryptonian ship. But did he ever say that it was Kryptonian? Yes. He said Kryptonian deformity. That's right. He did say that. So, yeah, okay. Superman may not have been updated or briefed on that, now that I think about it. Because Lex Luthor told him that it was a Kryptonian deformity, blood of my blood. So, and he took off the band so he could show his blood, which was from a previous discussion that they had on the rooftop of LexCorp, right? Anyway, what I'm saying to you is that without going too far further, there's a lot of details in these things. You could try through the movie a bunch of times. You could repeat viewings in the movies because you get more and more stuff as you look with each viewing. And if you are a reflective sort of person and you like to go things over, like I do, you would find more information and more information, which is what makes these movies age so well, I think. And they're just very interesting movies, to be honest with you. Anyway, I spent enough time on that. What I'm saying is that what Warner Brothers tried to do is they tried to force, because they wanted to be like Marvel, they wanted to do this Marvel DC crossover. They tried to force, because they think I don't know why, but they think that it's easy to do what David Goyer, Zack Snyder, and Christopher Nolan do. You know, they should have learned their lesson by now. Tim Burton, they got rid of Tim Burton. They brought in I forgot what his name is, and he did Batman Forever. And because Batman Forever was a success, even better than Batman Returns, they took that to mean that Batman could be done by anybody, any actor, and Batman could be pulled off by any director. And then they tried to get the what you call it, the Batman and Robin to work, and it so flopped. It's so flopped, right? They tried to get Superman to work for 33 years. They finally get Superman to work, at least financially, uh, through Zack Snyder, and they said, anybody could do Superman, man. And so then they, did the Justice League thing with Joss Whedon. They think Joss Whedon, Marvel director. Good. Now we could get this Marvel DC crossover going. Because the trades, everybody's bashing Zack Snyder stuff, especially after BVS, and bashing everything. Oh, this universe is dark and dreary and blah, 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 right? And they literally trying to sabotage the whole process so they can get their DC Marvel crossover. They need, no. DC needs to be more like Marvel so we could get this DC Marvel crossover, right? So Jeff Johns is pushing that, of course. And so characters are not bright enough, and hope and light and brightness. Okay, right. You guys get what I'm saying. So the executives are gulping that up because they're like, we were going to get that Marvel success. We're going to try and line up with Marvel, have kind of similar kind of, trajectory and outlook. We're going to roll back the clock. We're going to do the Richard Donner thing again. We're going to do that, that Batman parody, Batman 66. We're going to have these happy, go-lucky, jokey, campy, figures nobody takes seriously because it's kids. And we're going to get this crossover. Just like Disney has been doing it time and time again with their successful Disney movies, we're going to get that too. And then Marvel with Joss Whedon, okay, we're going to bring Joss Whedon on board. We're going to brighten this thing up. We're going to make this thing good so we can get a Marvel DC crossover, right? So this is what these executives are shooting for, right? And they shoot themselves in the foot, right? We know that Justice League 2017 was a fucking flop, right? And then after that, they said, okay. Now this came after Wonder Woman. See, they thought, because, everybody says it, Wonder Woman sounded like a Captain America movie, right? Wonder Woman, they said, Wonder Woman is kind of like Captain America, right? That's what they said. It's kind of like Little Mermaid kind of story, right? Walt Disney Little Mermaid, right? The Disney vibe. So they thought with the success that they had with Wonder Woman and the kind of success that they kind of had with Suicide Squad, that means there's a green light. Go ahead and you take Joss Whedon, you do a Marvel director, and they're going to clean up Zack Snyder's movie, and we need to kick Zack Snyder to the curb because of BVS, and we're going to have the success we need to have. And what did happen? It backfired royally, right? The campy version of Justice League just did not work. It backfired royally, right? And then they were able to swindle most of the fans into believing that Aquaman was something. But again, it's the same campy bullshit. And with action flicks, the Marvel formula. And that succeeded. I heads up everybody. I told them this is the same. They're Marvelizing this thing. They didn't listen to me. And they went and they supported it. Fine. Y'all got swindled twice. Shazam, not as much. Shazam was, again, the Marvel formula. But why Shazam kind of works was because Shazam is a funny character. Nobody's saying no. A boy in a man's body, that lands for humor. It wasn't organic humor. It was forced humor, in my opinion. Zachary Levi kind of sucks as a Shazam, but it is what it is. They typecast him. It was more of a comedy than it needed to be. Zachary Levi overacted the character, but it is what it is. It wasn't sincere. It felt very artificial. But nonetheless, that movie also did well. And then when the people realized, oh my goodness, are you really serious? You're not going to go back to the tone of Snyder or of Nolan or of Burton? You're really going to go back to Schumacher's tone of Batman and Robin to sell toys? When people realized that was up with Birds of Prey, which was a sort of a sequel to Suicide Squad, they didn't support it. Wonder Woman 84, same shit, didn't support it. The Suicide Squad, same shit, didn't support it. Black Adam, the problem with Black Adam wasn't that it was a tremendously bad movie like those other movies before. It wasn't. It actually was a little bit more grounded. It was a little bit more serious. They still poked jokes in it. There was still, the stakes weren't the same. Um, so it did better than those other movies. The problem was it came right after Zack Snyder's Justice League that year. Suicide Squad had failed, and Zack Snyder's Justice League was never put into cinemas. And when people saw Zack Snyder's Justice League, they really came to appreciate what Zack was doing. Because again, it was another emotional movie coming from an emotional place, and all these strangers coming together to work together, you know, having developed and you know, grown as people working together with each other. And the result was failure initially, but it was saved through the Flash turning back time against stakes. You know, the worst possible thing that could possibly happen in the movie happened. But it made one of the characters rise to the occasion and so save the world. So it was a true superhero movie, and it is my favorite superhero movie today. It used to be Unbreakable and Split and Glass, but after I saw this movie, it really took everything. And then what it took for the fans to even bring it about is a fan-led, fan-pushed movie that came into existence, very much like Deadpool was a fan-led, fan-moved movie that came into existence as well. Um, and so when you have fan-led things like that, you don't let them go. And the biggest mistake the studio made was to continue down the course it was going, in which nobody was interested in that course. And it didn't have the major DC characters. And of course, more importantly, it did not follow what Tim Burton set as a foundation. It didn't stimulate interest. It didn't even have the grounded world that Christopher Nolan had set. There's foundational pieces, the foundational pieces that work for DC that they abandoned, the studio abandoned to do this campy, funny, jokey, marvelized, pre Tim Burton, pre Frank Miller era. As I said before, Tim Burton and Zack Snyder kind of messed up DC in the sense that, and Christopher Nolan, in the sense that they made very appealing, interesting stories which had a grounded foundation, especially after Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan kind of messed it up for everybody else because now the only way you're going to be able to do something where you can suspend belief, as happened in the Wonder Woman movie, is by you still having a grounded story, but this doesn't apply to this individual because this individual is not human. You know, kind of like that. That's the best way to do it. And you know, Hawk Girl's a Thanagarian. Hawkman's a Thanagarian. You know, and Black Adam had Hawkman as an Earthling. You know, and I guess James Gunn also. And those kinds of things just don't, you know, you know, Star Trek. Let me go to Star Trek because Star Trek was a reflective sort of movie. It was Star Wars was more about adventure. Star Trek was more about reflection and how we could work together as human beings, or shall I say, even beyond humanity, to beings, right? The Justice League was supposed to epitomize that, which is why Superman's not a human, Wonder Woman's not a human, and Aquaman's half human, you know. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the way how Zach was approaching Justice League is the way how Star Trek approaches its topics. They're very reflective. They're very thought-provoking. They're very thoughtful. And to go from that and what Christopher Nolan was doing to trying to do ultra campy, over the top, not much thinking, straightforward story was a downgrade. And yes, in that respect, Zack Snyder very much so has hurt the DC brand in that it's taken the standard of the DC brand to such a height where there's no return. If you don't provide a compelling, interesting story filled with both danger, yes, some humor if you want, but adventure, intrigue, suspense, you know, if you don't provide something like that, which is a combination of Tim Burton's work and the combination of Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan, you're in for a rude awakening every single time. They're gonna say rinse and repeat, right? You have to come with something. You got to come with a story where we can't predict the ending like that. We know the good guy probably might win. Maybe he won't. Because remember, in BVS, Superman lost. In Batman, in The Dark Knight, Batman lost, right? So, Zack Snyder has the ability to do that, right? Todd Phillips is great, but I don't know if he's a universe builder. You see what I'm saying? But he's great. Matt Reeves didn't do a bad job either, right? But I don't know if he's a universe builder. He's building his own universe around Batman. But to say, is it a successful, compelling, as say, what Zack Snyder would do? I don't know, right? He hasn't made that kind of money yet. What intrigues me is James Gunn has an ensemble film with members of the Justice League and also with members of Superman's stuff, and yet he can't even gross anywhere near Man of Steel numbers. He should be, because he's doing a Justice League film, which he doesn't realize, but that should be doing numbers like Justice League. He can't even make the Justice League that Joss Whedon did. He can't even make those numbers. That's disappointing on an epic scale, and shows you how much the fandom is just not into what Warner Brothers is doing, and they're less and less interested. And what is supposed to be a big, major blockbuster with all these characters and everything failed miserably. So trying to be like Marvel, trying to go the what would they say, pathos and comedy way, it doesn't work. Not for DC. It just doesn't. And no matter how much these executives want to push against that, they're going to find themselves time and time again reaching a dead wall. So then the real question is, how do they get a DC Marvel crossover if that way that they're trying to do, Marvelizing DC, doesn't work? DC is DC. And 1978 is 1978. And 1966 is 1966. And trying to turn back the clock, turn back time, and capture the essence of those times is far gone. You're not going to be able to make a film. Tim Burton spoiled that for you. So to try and retrieve what Adam West was able to do, or even what Christopher Reeve was able to do with Richard Donner, that's never going to happen for DC. The only way is unless you're doing your Lego movies. And if you want to cross over a Lego movie with, with Marvel, then go be my guest. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, DC is DC, and DC has its own tone. Marvel is Marvel. So the question is, how do we cross over Marvel with DC, right? And the answer to that is right there in front of you. Deadpool. Deadpool has done it for X-Men characters. Deadpool being an X-Men. And Deadpool is an X-Men, but he's an X-Men that is funny as hell. So that is where you can start crossing over DC with Marvel. And the Snyderverse is the perfect straitjacket person to cross over with Marvel. Because if you look, DC characters generally are straight. They're not funny, okay? And you have the straight man to play off of the funny man. That clash really works well. And then from there, you can take Marvel characters and put them in DC films. You can take DC characters and put them in Marvel films. And it opens up the door for both universes to interact with each other, which has happened in the comics, mind you, as you could clearly see here. So, step one, you need to restore the Snyderverse. But a lot of people think that restoring the Snyderverse means you have to start off with the Ayer cut. That to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Where are you going to get the money to do the Ayer cut? I say, if you're going to restore the Snyderverse, and it's called the Snyderverse for a reason, you start with Zack Snyder. You start with his movies he's already done. He's done 3 movies: Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And guess what? 2 of those 3 movies has never seen globally cinemas. Man of Steel has. The thing about Man of Steel, which is why I said include Man of Steel in this, and I don't just start with Zack Snyder's Justice League, is because Man of Steel is well loved and appreciated to this day by most people. So to see that classic, and Zack Snyder did a version of Man of Steel where he reintegrated the color of it so it's much more colorful than the original. That should be the version that goes into theaters, seeing he put in all that work. I don't know if he has it IMAX ready or not, but that is a film that should be showing in cinemas. And how long should it show in cinemas? Globally, 2 weeks, no more. Okay? That will add to Man of Steel's box offices, of course, and that will make news, and that will be positive news for Warner Brothers. After Man of Steel has shown in theaters for 2 weeks, you then proceed to Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, which has IMAX ready, certain parts are IMAX ready. So you can show it in cinemas and you can also show it in IMAX. And again, it is I think it's a recolored version that has never seen theaters that you should put up there into theaters. That would be an incredible experience because no one has seen the Ultimate Edition in theaters except for the people in Full Circle event that happened in 2022. After you've done with that for 2 weeks, you go into the theaters one last time to see the last of the trilogy, which would be Zack Snyder's Justice League. And since it's a 4-hour movie, you break it up into 2-hour parts. Maybe one wherever you find a part where it's to be continued, you put to be continued, and then you can divide it equally into half, or you can divide it at wherever the segment ends, and you say to be continued. You have one half in the morning, you have the next half in the afternoon. That's how you do it. And 2 weeks, and then you're done. That run, believe it or not, will give Warner Brothers a lot more money than they think. It could reach over $1 billion. It could possibly do that. But even if it doesn't do that, even if it does 500 million, 400 million, they didn't have to put out any extra money except for distribution and putting it into cinemas and probably a little advertising. Which, if it cost them as much as, I don't know how much it would cost them. That's a great question, actually. But trust me, if they put it out and the fandom knows this, they'll spread it for them. So it's something where they won't have to do a whole set of promoting for, and it won't cost them as much money to do. And I'm telling you right now, the returns on that will be ridiculous. Put that thing into theaters, because those 2 movies never saw theaters. So of course people will love to see that in theaters. You give them enough notice, you give them enough time, and you just run that thing, man. You run it. I think Batman Begins and Batman 1989 and Batman Returns has gone back into theaters. I don't remember the date. I think it's just one day they had it playing in theaters, but they should really, again, it's movies. You should at least give it a decent week to 2 weeks for one movie and then 2 weeks for the other movie. And you should really advertise it properly so everybody knows. I kind of know, but not enough. And the buzz that would happen if Zack Snyder's Justice League is going into theaters, that would be a big buzz. I think the most money will be made by Zack Snyder's Justice League. The bad taste of Batman v Superman, some people's mouth because of circulated rumors and etc. Might not. It might not give the results. It would probably be the longest of the 3 movies to be sitting in the cinema to watch. But that would be something I would look forward to, something like that. That's how you begin to restore the Snyderverse. It's not through the Ayer cut. Now, having done that, raised that money, then you could probably think about putting out the Ayer cut, getting it finished with whatever money you have from that. I'm sure David Ayer could finish up his movie, put it out into cinemas as a normal run, 4-week run, 5-week run. 5 weeks should be enough to accumulate most of the money for that movie. And then you follow it up with Wonder Woman. And some of the revenue again from Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Snyderverse trilogy, you could take some of that money and pump it into Wonder Woman to change back the ending to what it was supposed to be. Um, get that done, put that out there with Patty Jenkins. And right after the haircut, you have Wonder Woman, and then after Wonder Woman, you could have Zack Snyder's Justice League playing cinemas for the second time, but with a little modification, the Green Lantern scene being involved at the end of it, and there you go. So I mean, if you're gonna put the Green Lantern scene back in, people are definitely gonna go see Zack Snyder Justice League just to see the ending of Zack Snyder Justice League. So that's more money for you, and that's how you do it, Warner Brothers. That's how you get the Snyderverse restored. You right the wrongs you've done, and from there, if you make enough money off of those things, whatever it is that you calculate needs to be made, and it's successful, then you go on to do Zack Snyder Justice League 2. You continue, you get Batfleck if he can come back to do the Batfleck movie, which would be great as well. And with Joe Manganiello, um, you get Zack Snyder Justice League 2 in the works, and you get a Man of Steel solo movie uh, in the works with Henry Cavill. So that's what you do. I don't know if Gal Gadot would be coming back as Wonder Woman. They may have to recast somebody else. Even though everybody loves Gal Gadot, I gotta say, Gal Gadot right now, and me personally, I don't want to see her doing any more movies until she handles that Palestinian issue. She has to take a stand that is against the IDF's butchering of people in Palestine. When she does that, sure, you can then continue your Hollywood career. We would be embracing of her as Wonder Woman, but Wonder Woman represents somebody who embraces everyone and literally defends the powerless and helpless. So if you can't see that these Palestinians are powerless and helpless, and that they're starving, and that they're trying to, find an answer to their problems and be free, if you can't be supportive of that, I don't really want to see you as Wonder Woman. You know, I've had a group where a lot of people put up Gal Gadot post, and I've pretty much um stopped people from posting up on her. A lot of people also post up about Wonder Woman in the comics and stuff like that. But Gal Gadot, I would quicker bring back Ezra Miller as the Flash than Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and that's just my point of view on that. I don't care. Don't get me wrong, she's a great. I think she's a pretty good actress. So I'm not mad at her in terms of her acting, but I don't think that she she's thinking, oh, I don't understand how she cannot think about other human beings, and she thinks of them. I don't understand it. So and why she's defending the IDF, I don't understand. And how can you be? It's 2 years in that they've been just butchering these people. I mean, slaughtering these people to take their land. Oh no, 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 no! I cannot. I definitely am not going to support somebody like her. I'm just not going to do it. That's not. I mean, you talk about humanity. You talk about caring for people, the poor, the weak, the children, and you see children, their faces blasted in, shot in the head by your people, and you're not being hypercritical about that. You got to be kidding me. She should be so outspoken. She should be so outspoken about that nonsense. So the fact that she's even quiet about it is not good. Her choice to have hostage swaps, I'm totally for that. I'm totally for ceasefire. I'm totally for hostage swaps. I'm totally for peaceful ways of going about this. The violence and the destruction that has been caused on an epic scale on the Palestinians, the ultimate evil that has been done to them is unforgivable and will not go out unpunished. Every single person who is involved in such dealings will be brought to justice. Believe you me that. But with respect to the other cast, Jason Momoa, etc. I would like to see all of them back, of course, and see the sequel, because I'm telling you, man, I am so fired up and interested for Justice League 2 and 3. It's not funny. It's like my excitement for Constantine 2. I would love to see Constantine 2 as well. That's something that, potential that has not been fully capitalized on or developed, and we would love to see that as well as a solo Superman movie, a true solo, not no ensemble Superman movie like what James Gunn's did, a solo Superman movie. Love to see that happen as well. And as I said before, Deadpool is right there. We saw him play with a straight guy, and the straight guy played very well Wolverine, and that's the opening door for Deadpool to deal with other X-Men, etc. Deadpool was such a success, and it's the weird thing. Marvel is trying to sort of downplay that success now. Kevin Feige, I've heard behind the scenes, did not want Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool movie to be successful, and that's just again asinine and stupid, because literally you want a Marvel DC crossover. Okay, here comes an organic opportunity for Marvel and DC to cross over the Snyderverse with Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. I mean, Ryan Reynolds is very positive towards the Snyderverse. The dude literally hired Henry Cavill in his movie. Like Henry Cavill was literally brought into his movie to be a Wolverine, and he played a fucking fantastic job of Wolverine in the movie as well. He brought back Wesley Snipes. My God. I think that the other thing I want to say, to right the wrongs, we need to do a couple things. One, posthumously, we need to give Richard Donner the credit he deserves. I don't know how they're going to go about doing that, but in Zack Snyder's Justice League 2, they need to do that. In the Batman movie, Tim Burton needs to get the respect that he deserves. Whether you guys are going to cameo him in the movie, I don't care what the fuck you do. Tim Burton is responsible for how Batman um, is seen today. The modern Batman that you guys so appreciate, Tim Burton's responsible for that. Christopher Nolan uh, got the success he got because of Tim Burton. Okay, Warner Bros. Kind of righted the ship with Christopher Nolan. They should have brought back Tim Burton, really, quite frankly. But anyway, and if you really want to do Superman, what's the word I'm looking for? Superman Lives. You should just hire Tim Burton to do Superman Lives with Nicolas Cage, and they'll obviously have to revise it because Nicolas Cage is older and so on. But they should do a Superman Lives. Warner Brothers has gotten rid of certain projects that, again, you had you had George Miller, who was going to do a Justice League movie, right? You guys need to think, man. Warner Brothers needs to think about what they're doing, you know. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that. So Habad said, "Yeah, DC is so dead, and the real, true DC fans pulled the trigger over 11 times." Yes, 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 yes. That Marvel thing, trying to force DC to be Marvel, it really hurt the brand. It really hurt the brand. And even if you look at the most successful comics in DC, even though they kind of reworked the lore, it's the absolute DC comics right now. They're sucking the life out of the other DC comics because they're writing shit. But the point is, absolute DC comics. And what? What do you know about absolute DC comics? They're serious. They're not funny. There's no jokes. There's no ha ha ha. There's none of that. And why? Because that's not DC. Okay? Hamad says, "I'm hearing there's a full-blown orgy scene in The Peacemaker, a DC TV show that's connected to the Superman world. The first thing that crossed my mind was when Hector Navarro was having one of those fake meltdowns over the use of the F word in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yeah, when Batman said, 'And I will fucking kill you.'" I gotta say it, man. I gotta say it. I'm be honest with you guys, man. I don't get it as a DC fan. I don't get why Warner Brothers chose to go. I understand they want to do a Marvel DC crossover. I get it. I get that part. But I don't understand. You failed so many times trying to do this for so many years. Every time you try to do the brain dead thing and try to do a massive marketing campaign to sell toys and merchandise, you failed. Don't you understand? Movies are not like stock or merchandise. It's not something that can be manufactured. What part of that do you not understand, man? It's art. And the sooner you treat it like that and you stop trying to give suggestions to writers, to creatives, to directors, the better. Your job is to finance it. Your job is to trust the directors in their decision-making processes, to take risks. It's not a one and done deal. And both Marvel and DC are now coming to terms with that because the fans are starting to vomit out their stuff and say, this does not taste good. This is not good for me. Something about this is manufactured. So much that it hurt Marvel's Fantastic Four. I heard it was a good movie. I was not interested in it. But the point is, that was much more of a quality movie. It was a much more serious movie. There wasn't a whole bunch of jokes in it. But people had gotten tired of the rinse and repeat formula that Marvel was doing. And they absolutely are disgusted with the rinse and repeat formula that DC is doing. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. There's no real creativity. There's no real effort put into it. And I don't care how passionate James Gunn says he is. He's not the director for Superman. He's not the right guy for Superman. You know, it's funny. They criticize Zack Snyder saying he's not the guy to direct a Superman film. When he didn't write it, James Gunn wrote the Superman movie. He didn't write it. He didn't produce it. All he did was direct it at the admonition of Christopher Nolan. Okay? And amazingly, they will say that Man of Steel, Zack Snyder didn't get Man of Steel. No, you can't say Zack Snyder didn't get Man of Steel. He's the director. That's all he is. The guy who wrote it was David Goyer. Are you saying David Goyer didn't get Man of Steel? Are you saying that? Because David Goyer also did a TV series on Sci-Fi called Krypton. You're saying he didn't get Krypton either? And Jeff Johns was behind that. Jeff Johns did a lot of that thing. Are you saying he didn't get Krypton? Because if you say Krypton was so good, then why the fuck you can't get what Man of Steel is? I'm just saying. No, the truth is, y'all have an issue with Zack Snyder. David Goyer wrote in the script where Superman was supposed to snap Zod's neck. That wasn't Zack Snyder's idea. Zack Snyder's a director. He's not a writer. Not for that film. That was David Goyer's decision. And Zack Snyder made it a reality. And Zack Snyder argued with David Goyer and pushed back on Christopher Nolan when Christopher Nolan thought it wasn't a good idea. Okay? So you can't blame Zack Snyder for Superman snapping Zod's neck. The guy you have to blame is David Goyer. And guess what? David Goyer knows comics and comic books inside out. So when you start talking about David Goyer is the guy that did all kinds of movies. Blade, he wrote for Blade. He wrote for a lot of movies, very successful movies. Are you telling me that David Goyer doesn't know the source material? Is that what you're telling me? But Jeff Johns does? I'm just saying. The person who originated this thing and tried to trash David Goyer was Jeff Johns. That fucker. You guys need to understand what's going on. It's a competition. Jeff Johns is angry that he had no input into the creative nature of Man of Steel. So he started immediately trying to tarnish Man of Steel, tarnish the reputation of Zack Snyder, because he knew Zack Snyder was a great director and he knew he was a threat to Marvel. When Zack Snyder came out with Batman v Superman, all this bullshit that you hear people saying, oh, they should have had a Man of Steel sequel. They moved too fast with Batman v Superman. Okay, when Comic-Con came in San Diego Comic-Con 2014, and they announced Batman v Superman, the whole of that fucking Comic-Con went nuts. Nuts. After Harry Lang said what he said, and the symbol of Superman, symbol inside of Batman's shield, came up. They went fucking nuts. Okay? Because that was something that was on the cards with Warner Brothers since 2004 and was seen in that movie with Will Smith. I forgot what the name of it is right now. It'll come to me. The zombie movie, right? So you can just eat grass when it comes to telling me that they move too fast with Batman v Superman. That's nonsense. The only blooper in that whole thing was cutting out that 30 minutes of Batman v Superman. That's it. And that's on the studio. They wanted shorter run time so they could make more money off of it. They ended up making less money than if they was to do it for its full time, let the movie breathe and let the director tell his story. That's their mistake. Their mistake is not Batman v Superman. It was a direct sequel to Man of Steel. It began where Man of Steel ended. Nothing was wrong with Batman v Superman, except for what I just said. So don't let them fool you. Fake outrage. They were mad that Zack Snyder was taking the universe in a different direction to which they wanted. They wanted to be like Marvel. They wanted the Marvel numbers. They wanted the Marvel success. And they wanted it now. And they overruled the creative, which in this case was Zack Snyder, who didn't have the protection of Christopher Nolan. If Nolan put his foot down and said, no, this is the way how this movie was going to go, this would be a different story. There'll still be the hate on Batman v Superman. Don't get me wrong. But they couldn't say that it was a poorly paced, poorly written, poorly executed movie. They wouldn't be able to say that. It would have also made more money. Yeah, I'm tired of seeing these images and pictures of children blasted to Thy Kingdom Come. This is a little child, no older than 10 years of age, lying without a head or a pulp that looks like a head. Axel Said says Zack Snyder is the blueprint. The movement was just like the comic books. The movement was just like the animated series and animated movies. This is what makes Zack Snyder so cool. When I saw Superman punch Zod like that in the trailer, it definitely captured my interest because I've never seen Superman punch like that in any live action film or any live action period. And see, these are the things that make people interested. When you bring to the table something that's never been seen before, or some story that's never been given that kind of take. The kind of generic shit that they are doing now is just uninteresting. It is. And it's because they're trying to recapture another time that has since gone. It's not coming back. I told you, when Tim Burton put out Batman 1989, since 1989, that stuff doesn't work anymore. You can't just get by with that slop. Not in DC. So trying to Marvelize DC and force people to accept a certain way how DC will be relayed. And then the thing about James Gunn is he's so fucking depraved. Literally, I believe now that this guy was chilling out and fraternizing with pedophiles. Well, we know that's a fact. But I think he himself is a pedophile. The way how he conveys things, the way how he does with Peacemaker, these depraved things, how he's all about sex and orgies and just all kinds of depraved stuff, tells me his mindset. And we see it again. What does he do? He does a Supergirl that's drunk. Why? Who in their right mind goes with Supergirl drunk so they can go from planet to planet, have sex with different people, and be drunk? That's fucking depraved. Superheroes don't behave like that, right? This is, and now he's going to do a Supergirl. There's going to be a Supergirl movie. He has a different director, but you start off introducing Supergirl as a depraved motherfucker. Oh man. So I mean, who's going to go see that shit? Not me. I'm turned off immediately, right? The Suicide Squad, turn off immediately. A lot of fuck, for fuck's sake. Just saying fuck. I was like, yuck. I'm a DC fan. I'm not a depraved sicko, So I could see this guy is a depraved sicko who needs to go get therapy. And he's also conveying exactly who he is on the screen. And guess what? Joss Whedon's the same thing, except he's not as sick and depraved as James Gunn on the screen. What he projects on the screen is depraved. It is sick for a joke. But James Gunn just took it to a whole other level of depravity and sickness. And for the people who can excuse that, I'm sorry, you are in the same boat as James Gunn. You are a depraved sicko too. I'm sorry. Like minds think alike. If you can enjoy that stuff, then it shows you are just like him. I'm sorry, that's just the way how that goes. And I'm not saying that all of us don't have some depraved, sick side of us. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these are superheroes, right? And superheroes, according to Jeff Johns, are supposed to give us hope and light. Okay? I'm just saying. So if Supergirl is a drunkard, she doesn't take care of her dog properly, and she goes about from planet to planet fucking people like a slut, what are you telling us? Remember we had the CW Supergirl series? At least they treated her with dignity. Richard Donner treated Superman with dignity. Yes, Superman was looking at Lois Lane's panties and telling her what color it was. But at the end of the day, they still treated him with dignity. Tim Burton, for all his warped, little perverted kind of jokes and his dark humor and his whatever I call it, his how do I put it? His kind of horror background that he has. For all of that, Tim Burton respected Batman. He didn't have Batman doing some real depraved things that I'm sure James Gunn would have done. Right? For all you say about Zack Snyder, and he did Sucker Punch, mind you, Zack Snyder always brings the dignity, a certain degree of moral ethics to the table. Something James Gunn doesn't have. He's as immoral as they come. He lies on the drop of a dime. And he always throws other people under the bus except for himself. He's all about narcissism. He's all about self-preservation. And the irony is they say Zack Snyder is that, when Zack Snyder is nothing like that. Zack Snyder doesn't lie. Zack Snyder doesn't disrespect the characters that are on the screen. He treats them with reverence. Even Patty Jenkins, for all the shit that she did in Wonder Woman 1984 with the guy who possessed another guy, Steve Trevor possesses another guy's body and all this, which is very depraved, to be honest with you. She still tried to treat Wonder Woman with a certain degree of dignity and respect. Particularly her Wonder Woman 2017 movie is the gold standard, in my opinion, of Wonder Woman. Okay? The ending was shit, but she was treated Wonder Woman again with dignity and respect. And I love that. You look at all the guys before, they at least had respect for the DC mode. Joss Whedon and James Gunn have no respect for the DC brand. They continuously dehumanize, denigrate the DC heroes. Okay? including Superman, the top hero in the superhero pantheon of heroes, have no respect for Superman either. And so it's very sad to see what is transpiring since then with these heroes. And I, for one, believe that DC is at this point in time very much dead. The movie that supposedly James Gunn was supposed to launch the DCEU with, which is the Superman movie, has flopped. Has flopped. And Warner Bros. Put a lot of money behind this movie, a lot of money behind this movie, and they have not gotten their returns. They haven't got a dime for it. And that's the second flop James Gunn has provided to this studio. And they really don't have anywhere to go now but down. It's only going to get worse. So if they were looking for this DC Marvel crossover that they so wanted, they could have it. And Kevin Feige have it, but it's probably going to be a flop DC Marvel crossover when it does happen. Because the DC brand is going down the tubes, and Marvel is going down the tubes. And that's why people are saying with comic book movies, it looks like there's comic book movie fatigue, and it looks like the genre is going to die off. And quite frankly, it's not that. It's that people are coming wise to the fact that you've been telling the same story for the last decade, and you've been getting by with that same story, with the lack of innovation, with the cheap look of movies. And when DC started repeating what Marvel was doing, it exposed the whole thing for what it was. And Marvel fans started to wake up to the fact that, and Marvel didn't have any competition anyway. And to hear them praising Superman being, a higher gross than most of Marvel movies, a more successful flop than the other Marvel flops, is sad, quite frankly. Sad. Well, at least it beat Fantastic Four for Steps. And I'm like, bruh, that's your standard? Really? A flop? That it beat a flop in so many years? Well, it's just that Marvel fell down to the level of DC. DC been flopping for a long time. It just so happens that Marvel is now flopping with DC. That's what's happening. They're flopping together. And the only way to rescue that is to bring back in the Snyderverse. That's the only thing that really is interesting out of all these movies. And clearly, money talks, bullshit walks. End of story. Deadpool and the Wolverine was very, very interesting. A lot of F-bombs, but it was very interesting for the reason that we saw characters come back, and you could say it's a cameo fest or whatever. The story was paper thin, of course, but the fact that Ryan Reynolds said all these commentaries and all kinds of things currently going on is what made it funny. And he showed possibilities for what could happen and what wouldn't happen. So shout out to Ryan Reynolds on that. And of course, the studio doesn't like it for that. But Ryan Reynolds got the creative freedom to do what he wanted to do, and he did it. And he promoted it and everything. And great job by Ryan Reynolds. And that's the avenue through which, whether Kevin Feige likes it or not, that is your avenue to cross over DC with Marvel. Take it or leave it. Ooh, yeah, I love it. I love it. EAC says, over 75 million followers. Pushing the thumbs up is easier than the heart. Still loses. So in Facebook, Joy Salad says, which one do you prefer? Put a heart for Man of Steel and a thumbs up for Superman. And where's Joey Salas from? He's from a Marvel DC group, Greg. And wow, more than twice the amount of people wanted Man of Steel. And this is probably a DC Marvel group. My point being, and even the announcer in one of the radio channels on my country said he prefers Man of Steel to Superman any day of the week. He says it's a better made Superman film. And it's a Superman film, but it's more of a Superman origin film, obviously. And of course, it's much better. So here's another. Oh, so I just want to show you. I just want to show you guys a little bit more evidence that Snyderverse runs things out here. Culture Base said, who is the best adapted Batman on the big screen? They have Batman, the Lego Batman. They have Nolan's Batman, starring Christopher Bale as Batman. They have Michael Keaton's Batman with the classical motherfucking Batmobile. And then we have Robert Pattinson's Batman from Matt Reeves' The Batman, right? And a Culture Base has Vote Here. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is the comment section. Welcome. Okay, this is me. Restore the Snyderverse. There's only one true Batman in live action. Batfleck, right? Saitama says, you purposely excluded Batfleck. Y'all motherfuckers can fuck off. Stanley Ipkiss says, as if you put Lego Batman there and not Ben Affleck's Batman. Affleck's is the most accurate we've had on the screen. Pick Ben Affleck and Affleck Ben. Omni High Potent says he's missing from your shitty tweet. Ben Affleck picture. None of them. It's Ben Affleck. Oh, it's Batfleck, sorry. Ben Affleck. Here's a Michael Keaton. Affleck. I forgot his name. But he's the animated series Batman. I forgot. Do you guys remember his name? Do you remember this guy's name? Please, somebody help me here. I don't know why I'm forgetting his name right now. Ben Affleck. Batfleck. This one. Best Batman that ever was and will always be. Cope and Cease. Batfleck. Bake with Pattinson coming for his title. The best adapted Batman isn't there. Next, Batfleck. The warehouse seat was top tier Batman. You're not brave. Okay. And this got somebody out. Marth13 says, for those saying Batfleck, he might seem the coolest, had the best live action fight. Bit is by far not the best adaptation of the character. If you read Batman, you would know. He looks best with the comics, but the character is nowhere near that statement. Caleb Smith says, we did read the comics, which is why we vote Batfleck. Okay, no you didn't. If you read one of the one based his character on, you wouldn't have. To which he says, yes, we did. Even Kevin Conrad said that Batfleck was the best. On visual, maybe. Comic accurate, he is not. Read The Dark Knight and no, it's not The Dark Knight, my friend. It's The Dark Knight Returns. But anyway, I know he was not. And don't get me started with Justice League. That's almost an insult to Batman. Zack said Justice League kind of corrected, but the damage was done already. Whatever you say, dude, at least we agree that Justice League is terrible. Yeah, Caleb Smith. And again, The Dark Knight Returns absolutely is that Batman. That's The Dark Knight Returns in BVS. It might not be the comics you like, but he's definitely a pretty good contender. Bangkok Crowby says, explain how, because it's exactly like The Dark Knight Returns. Best Batman, Pattinson. Best Wayne Bale. Best overall, Keaton. The Batman, Will Arnett. The one you excluded, Batfleck. I like the Bale the better. Maybe Patterson or Lego Batman as well. This on the big screen. Oh yes, it's Conroy. What Conroy? Kevin Conroy. There you go. I think in the comments they gave you the answer you wanted to omit. Andre Zella says, I love Lego Batman as much as the next guy, but he's definitely not the best adaptation of Batman. And we have Batfleck coming with merciless frequency. Yeah, Bale. It's Affleck, to be honest. Batfleck. We got a couple. We got a couple Bales and all kinds of other guys, but then again, here it is again. No Batfleck is why you're such a shit account. Ben Affleck, thank you very much. Batfleck again. Oh, they got a couple other guys there. Oh my God, here's Batfleck again. The cult is upset. Please make a best adaptation Punisher on the big screen to make him happy. Affleck slept with your filthy mom. Ben Affleck. Oh boy. Not even close. Ben Affleck. 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 Batfleck. Affleck. Ben Affleck. Oh. Well, you know how it goes. I thought this was funny as hell. And this is what the studio feels. They don't want Ben Affleck there. That's why they got James Gunn to remove all of Zack Snyder's stuff. They just removed Zack Snyder's Justice League, or at least a Justice League in there that James Gunn was doing. They're trying to erase Zack Snyder from the history of DC, and it's fucking flopping. The people are saying, fuck you, WB, you fucking, you, hold on, let me say it right. As Ryan Reynolds so correctly said as Deadpool, we'll treat you much better than those shit fucks down the street, for sure. 100%. I so enjoy this post. Culture Base is the name of the Twitter handle. And they tried so hard to erase Ben Affleck's Batman from the equation. And you can see they send their shills and their trolls and their executives to try and make a case. And they lose every fucking time. Because we're dealing with, let me explain to you what this battle is about, to be real with you. It's the fans versus the studio. That's what's going on. It's a battle. It's a war. And we are not going to give up. And those shills that are shilling for the studio, they're not DC fans. Usually, they're paid employees and executives, and people know executives, and mouthpieces for the executives of Warner Brothers. When they say the Snyderverse is dead and they're so happy, which fan would do that? Think about what I'm saying. For the people who know what I'm talking about, even I, as a DC fan, I don't rejoice and keep on going on and on about the death of the Hamadaverse and the death of the Johnverse and the death of the Rockverse. I don't do that. Fans don't do that. Executives, mean-spirited, dirty-minded executives, they do that. So when you see somebody who's posing as a fan doing that, and when you see somebody with so much venom and hate for a universe or for a director doing that, even though I don't like personally James Gunn's style of visual making, you don't see me at every chance I get trying to throw digs at James Gunn. You don't see me doing that. I break down why I think that the studio hiring James Gunn to do what they have not succeeded at doing, to mobilize DC, doesn't work. But I'm not there trying to do personal attacks on James Gunn, and I don't do that. Why? Because I'm a DC fan. I'm a real DC fan. You see? So when you go into these things and you're trying to personalize it and you're trying to attack a person all the time, you have to ask yourself, who does that? And the only thing I could think of is the industry and people in the industry trying to destroy a director's reputation. Oh, that kind of level of vindictiveness is not coming from a fan. Average fans, okay, we don't necessarily. Yeah, a fan might say, I don't dig Man of Steel, or I don't like how Zack Snyder did BVS. Okay, and that's as far as it goes. You won't be following Zack Snyder all around every single movie, every single project he does. I hope it fails. Oh, he's a hack of a director. You won't be attacking a guy relentlessly like that. That's something that somebody in the industry does. Somebody who's vindictive, and they're hoping and wishing this guy gets destroyed. Because nobody even does that for James Gunn. James Gunn is, in my opinion, he's not that great a director. But nobody goes around wishing and hoping and praying that his career is destroyed and trying to destroy his career as fans. There are fans trying to expose him as a pedophile, and I think that's just, I don't go that far. I just don't do that. It does look like that now, to be honest with you, the way how the content that he puts out there. And there are a lot of pedophiles in Hollywood, so it's not surprising if he's one of them. And he does lie a lot. But at the end of the day, I really don't care that much about James Gunn, to be honest with you. I don't care much for his movies, and I don't really care much about him. So it's not like I'm going to dedicate my life to try and destroy his career and destroy his life. But apparently, what we're seeing, who's people who are supposedly called fans, are literally trying to destroy Zack Snyder's life and his career, and literally are rejoicing over the death, the suicide of his daughter. It's just sick. And they try to make jokes about that. That is just depraved. That is sickening. Who in their right mind does that? And I'm telling you, it's not fans doing that. Fans won't do that. Fans don't go that far. It's executives doing that. It's people in Warner Brothers that don't like Zack Snyder like that are doing those things. It's people that work in the industry that are doing those things. You look at the people who have their blue check marks, and they're either an animator or they're something. And when you look, they have a connection to Warner Brothers. It's their mouthpiece. This is how they feel about Zack Snyder. And I'm not saying Abdi and Luca are those kinds of people. I'm not saying that at all. They seem to be the oddballs out. They may lose their job, like they said, but they're doing it old school way. And yes, certain things they can't. I think if it was up to Abdi and DeLuca, maybe without the restrictions, and I don't know what legal frameworks they have to deal with inside of there, and I don't know what kind of embargo or what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the fuck it's called, where you can't speak about things going on in the studio. They call it a gag order. I don't know what gag orders they're under and so on. So I can't really say, and I don't know, because it seems like somebody in there, whether it's Toby Emmerich or whoever it was before, it seems like they put a gag order on them, and as well as they put like legal restrictions so Zack Snyder can't do DC movies again. It seems like something like that that's going on. And I don't know if that happened with Tim Burton. I don't know if that happened with Richard Donner. I don't know. But what I do know is that, and they have the license to do whatever they want with their with the characters, so they could do whatever they want to Warner Brothers. They have the license for them, right? But what I do know is that the studio, and I don't know if the studio is still ongoing a court case concerning Superman, and I don't know if it's the Shyster estate or the Schuster estate. I'm not sure which one it is. But Schuster estate, but I would say that I do believe there's some kind of legal ramification of trying to bring Zack Snyder back to do DC movies. But I think he's going to end up back there anyway, by hook or by crook. I don't know if it's going to be with the studio, Warner Brothers, or whoever. He's going to be back there. and he's going to complete whatever he started, which will be good for him. And also, I think more of the Snyderverse will come out because I think there's interest there versus the anti-interest or the so-called anti-interest of the detractors to the Snyderverse who say, oh, the Snyderverse is dead and it will never come back and so on. And that language just constantly, I look at it, it's always the people in the industry, the Jody's Corners, the Collider people, those kinds of people continuously talk, just like how they all came in unison and were saying, the Snyder Cut never exists. It doesn't exist. It'll never come to be. That's something that will never happen. The Snyder Cut never exists. They used to say the same thing. And to me, this sounds like an inside job. This sounds like people in Warner Brothers, associated with Warner Brothers, are being the mouthpieces for them. And so when they say the Snyderverse is dead, or they say that, the Snyderverse will never come back, it's almost like rinse and repeat. Sounds like the same thing that happened with the Snyder Cut. Like literally. And they're trying to, in other words, they're trying to convince the people who are pushing for these things that this will never happen. And it's it's so funny because you can't tell me what won't happen or what will happen. I'm the one that pays you to do what you do. See, I sit in a position of power and I know this and you don't. Now they will say to me, well, it's really what you pay me to, am I just your puppet? That's how the people in the industry feel about it. Am I just your puppet to do your bidding? And you tell them, no, you're not a puppet to do my bidding. You don't have to listen to me and I don't have to pay you, right? It's mutual. I don't have to do what you say and you don't have to do what I say. But there are consequences to it. Now, I'm asking you for something that I'm very interested in seeing more of. And that's up to you. I mean, you can be stupid and ignore me and decide to provide something else. And maybe you're not stupid. Maybe you provide something else that gets my interest. Maybe. But the chances are that if reinventing the wheel instead of just going with the wheel, I would say, I'd probably go with the wheel and reinvent the wheel. I mean, that's just me. I don't know. This seems like a layup in the making. This is a no-brainer. You know what I mean? You looked at the success of Deadpool. Fan-driven. Fan-instigated. Fan-demanded. You look at the wild success of Deadpool. And now you have a fan-demanded appeal to continue the Snyderverse, to let Zack Snyder finish his movies, to let the other movies that were supposed to come out in the Snyderverse happen. You have a layup in your hand. You don't have to lay it up. You could just abandon the whole play and do something else, which you've tried and you've failed miserably. Now, you could say, well, I don't want to retread that road. That's a path that I've left in the past. That's fine. Guess what? Somebody else will retread that road. We're not depending on you. We don't need you. You need us. We don't need you. We'll just appeal to the next person or the other person or whoever else. It just won't be you. But we are not going to stop. You see? So at the end of the day, if Warner Bros. Wants to see restore the Snyderverse end, then they would restore the Snyderverse. Otherwise, this will continue to haunt them, as Brad Curran so correctly stated. Because injustices were done to the fans, and we are not like Xbox fans. We're not like, there's a guy, I forgot what his name is, Prime is his name. And Prime was talking about, you have to take what you can get, and the studio's not going to bow to you, and they're not going to do what you want them to do. You look at video games, people have been requesting for years certain video games, and they give me what they want to give you. That's the thing. When you are a passive consumer, you take what you get. When you are an active consumer, you don't take what you get. You don't gobble up what they tell you. You don't buy what they buy. This is a different era, a different time, a different season. And what you're seeing is not superhero fatigue. You are seeing the consumer say to the provider, the businessman, what you're giving me, I don't want. This is what I want. Do you have it? And if you have it, give me. Otherwise, I go somewhere else. I shop somewhere else. I deal business with somewhere else. That's what you're seeing. It's that simple. Demand and supply. There's a lot of supply of this stuff, but I never asked for this stuff. As a consumer, I have learned, I went to buy some bottles. And while I was there was a deal. 2 cleaning products for $5, 500 mil products. And they were in groups. So you had, for example, you had disinfectant cleaning product, and you also had fabric softener. Then you had, in the other pair, you had liquid detergent, and then you had, I think, dishwashing liquid or something like that. And so I took the one of the pair in one of the boxes, one of the groups, that would be the fabric softener. And I took up another product from another pair, which was the liquid detergent. I put them together. I went to the counter to pay for them. I said, I would like to pay for these 2 things, $5. And they said, no, we don't do that. The liquid detergent and the disinfectant, they're up here. They're for $5. And your liquid detergent and your dishwashing liquid, they're up here. They're for $5, but you can't mix them. So I said, but what I really want is for my clothes. I want liquid detergent and I want fabric softener. We say, well, you have to buy a pair. You have to buy the fabric softener with the disinfectant. And then you could buy your liquid detergent if you want. I say, well, I don't want the disinfectant. I just want the fabric softener. So she said, no, you can't get that. I said, okay, fine. I did not buy the fabric softener and the disinfectant, and I just bought the liquid detergent, right? If you're telling me I have to buy to get the disinfectant something I don't want, why would I buy it? You see what I'm saying? As a consumer, you need to understand your power. You're a consumer. You're the one that's going to take your hard-earned money and you're going to pay for something. And when people try to make demands as to how you purchase things, and you don't want to do that, you have the right to say, I don't want to do that, and not pay for it. You're right as a consumer to pay for what you want and not necessarily for what people are giving you. You're well within your rights, and you need to understand that as a consumer. And don't think, oh, well, I don't, you know what, I'm just going to have to take what I take because this is going to make money anyway and it's going to sell anyway. No. If you, as a consumer, want X and they're giving you Y instead of X, why would you buy Y? That's not what you want. You want X. You have to go as a consumer and you will look through the marketplace till you find somebody who is providing X at a reasonable price that you can pay for. Right? So this is just simple business 101. If you're in a business relationship, which is what this is, where you're the consumer, you're a DC fan, you're a consumer, and the studio is the business person or the provider, and you find that what they're providing is not what you want, why would you buy it? Why would you purchase it? Why would you purchase it? And if you are asking for something from the studio, do you have this? Do you have this? And you continuously ask them for it, and they just ignore you and give you something else. Why should you take it? Why should you consume it? That's not what you asked for, right? You have to know what it is you're about as a consumer. And in this day and age where we have social media, where there's an ability to interact with studios and let them know what you want, you should do that. All right. And you should also inform the studios why it is you're not consuming what they have, because that's not what you want. And they need to understand that and respect that. Whether they decide to continue down the path that they're going, that's fine. They're free to do that. They don't have to listen to you. But at the same time, don't expect them, they should not expect from you for you to pay them for something that you wasn't asking for. You see what I'm saying? So it's a two-way street, and it's whether you want to have a conversation with your fans, whether you want to have a conversation with your customers and your consumers, right? And note, the studio and a CEO of DC are two different things. The studio needs to be paying attention to who their clientele is, because the studio has for a long time, these big studios have for a long time gotten away with giving the consumer whatever they felt like giving them. And that those days have changed quite a lot. Now we have Alita Battle Angel. You know, there's a whole set of people who want to see a sequel to that, and the studio needs to deliver on that. 20th Century Fox needs James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez need to deliver on that, because there's an expectation that we get a sequel. The Accountant 2 was because people enjoyed The Accountant so much that they wanted a sequel. Amazon Prime delivered on that. Okay, you look at Constantine is still something that everybody wants to see. You have the Snyder Cut, obviously. You have Acme versus Acme versus Wile E. Coyote. Acme versus Coyote. That is something, again, the fans wanted, they asked for, and Warner Brothers itself didn't deliver it. It's a subset studio that's delivering it, but Warner Brothers will be distributing it. And again, they got what they wanted. There's the Schumacher cut that people want to see. And again, once you have people wanting to see something, the air should be open to that, because that's a layup. That's a layup. Okay? That's a layup. You don't have to do much except get the thing revitalized, go back, get the old film, whatever, get it restored, and get that thing to the consumer, because the consumer's asking for it. They're asking for it. You can't get a better layup than that. Consumers are asking for a product. More of it? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Okay. We got so many things, and this is where studios will win. You will win. Deadpool is a win because, again, people wanted to see Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds capitalized on that. And Deadpool is a character that's human. People will want more Harley Quinn. People will want more Harley Quinn, of course, right? Say what you want. There was a win out of the Suicide Squad in 2016, Harley Quinn, right? She was a win for that. They'll want more Wonder Woman. They'll want more Batman. They'll want more. You know what fans want. They tell you. They don't keep it quiet. They want more Superman. They don't want that Superman. They want a Superman solo. They've been asking for that for years. A Superman solo movie. Particularly with Henry Cavill. Constantine, particularly with Keanu Reeves. Okay? And yeah, they're kind of a little bit specific about what they want, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Star Wars film. They want a Star Wars film like the early trilogy of Star Wars. They don't want this whatever that is that they're trying to give you. No, they want Star Wars film like the early Star Wars movies. Right? They're so clear on what they want. So give them what they want. Right? Those are layups. When fans tell you, okay, could you please stop with all this woke shit? Okay, so Superman had some woke shit, but wasn't over the top. But still, nonetheless, they say, don't do too much woke. We just want a good movie. We want a movie, not a kick 'em up movie. We want something different. We don't want a generic fucking movie. But we want something more like Christopher Reeve. If they say that, or something more like a Superman movie that's brighter, or a Superman movie where Superman is fully Superman now. He's confident in everything. And we want to see him as Superman. We get it. We do get it. You see what I'm saying? That's what they're asking for. They're not asking for a shit movie. They're not asking for all these other characters in there. They're asking for a Superman movie, like, Superman with the trunks and with the. You get what the fans are asking for. They're so clear on what they're asking for. Okay? Now, so there's different segments of fandom, and they tell you, and if you really listen to them, you have to listen to them. You can get layups. Easy layups. They ask you for the Snyderverse. They say, I want more of that. I want more of that. So you give them it. You don't create attitude and say, oh, no, that's it for Zack Snyder. That's stupid. That's stupid. Now you're fighting with the fans. Who has ever won a battle with the fans? Who has ever won a battle with fans? You never win. You always lose. Why would you want the fans to be your enemy? That's why Disney tries so hard to please their fans. It's not that you're a puppet and the fans tell you something and therefore you have to do it. No, you don't have to do anything. But it's smart. It makes business sense to further chisel down and understand what people are asking you for. It's always good. Right? And the thing that makes this so sad, unlike Tim Burton, who did Batman and Batman Returns, Zack Snyder finishes Zack Snyder's Justice League on a cliffhanger, of all things. And people, when you end something on a cliffhanger, at least people just think, oh man, I want to see how this ends. The fact that people are interested in knowing how that story ends, you can't. I mean, come on. Whether you like Zack Snyder or not, give him the money. Let's see how it ends. This is common fucking sense. Common sense. That's why I say I don't understand how people so intelligent could be so stupid. Especially in an era where you have interaction between fans and companies now. Social media makes that possible. You're going to ignore a large chunk of your audience. You're going to exile them and you're going to defame them because you want to do something separate. What kind of business sense is that? You got a layup. Easy. Instead, you decide to reshape the play and create a whole new play because you don't like a certain director. Because he doesn't allow you to do what you want to do, which is get a DC Marvel crossover. I mean, how petty and stupid is that? You think you're going to get the DC Marvel crossover if that director ain't there? I mean, what are you really saying? What are you really saying? You exiled Tim Burton. Richard Donner, he only revived his stuff 20 years later when he couldn't do anything about the movie. And that's not even his vision. You kicked out Christopher Nolan, screwed over Patty Jenkins, screwed over James Wan, screwed over David Sandberg. David Sandberg don't want to come back. Screwed over Andy Muschietti. Screwed over the lady who directed Birds of Prey. What are you really doing as a studio? You mistreat your creatives. Why? The whole reason we had released the Snyder Cut was so you would treat your creatives properly. Even James Gunn doesn't get to fully flush out his vision for what he wanted for Superman. I'm not saying I would enjoy it, but at least it would be more coherent than that piece of shit that you guys put out. Shame on you. The only people performing in that studio, in my opinion, is Abdi and DeLuca. And those are the people you want to fire. You want to fire them. I mean, what are you thinking? Oh, we got AI and we got all these screenings. We will be fine. Yeah, how's that going for you? That helped the DC brand not flop? How's that going for you? Everything else has a measure of success in Warner Brothers, except for DC, which is supposed to be their flagship. That's supposed to be the thing that brings them in the most amount of money. And I know why. It's failing. It's because those people in that studio are in their own bubble. They're in their own bubble. At least Disney listens somewhat to their fan base. But for the life of me, Warner Brothers and DC, they just don't do that. Abdi and DeLuca were reasonable people. They let Zack Snyder do his full circle event. And I'm pretty sure as people who oversee Warner Brothers Pictures, I'm sure they would have allowed him to continue telling his stories because they're more guys who will more tend towards greenlighting things, especially if the idea is original and interesting. They tend to more greenlight stuff than say, no, you can't do this. And that is something very good about them. They don't have to be 100% convinced, but if you can put forward a laid out, well thought out idea. Look at F1. F1, even though it's not making money, because its budget's like 300 million, between 200 and 300 million dollars. F1 has grossed quite a lot of money, but it's just not made profit yet. But from what I've heard, I haven't watched it, it's a quality movie. And it's an original quality movie. And sometimes some movies are worth it to be made, even though in the present point in time, they're not respected. Watchmen, for example, was a box office flop. But according to Greg Silverman, all of those other cuts of Watchmen that went on DVD made a ton of money for the studio. What am I saying? Sometimes movies, because of the times you're in, they may be a little too advanced for their time and so not appreciated. But with time, people appreciate these movies, and then they either become cult classics or they become part of the zeitgeist so that people can't do without them and they buy them up. I'll give you another example. Another movie is trying to remember the name of it right now. Welcome to My Little Friend. I forgot what his name is, the drug dealer guy, the mob guy that Al Pacino played. I forget what's the name of the movie. But that movie as well was a box office failure. But in home video, it's given the studio hundreds of millions of dollars. I forget what the name of it is. Kishan says, so this is somebody, for some reason, they think that that this is somehow stupid. Ali says, I completely forgot about this. What the hell, Lamau? The DNA of a billion people bonded into within the sun's individual cells, living hidden in one refugee's body. Apparently, I don't know, this person thinks that's stupid. And then Keishan responds with a better story than Didio. It has to do with Superman's father telling him to conquer Earth, General Zod style. So this Twitter handle says restore the Snyderverse and saw this posted up on some billboards. I don't know who got this kind of money. And you can see here, youtube.com, Marvel DCRU. Marvel DC. So it's a Marvel DC fan. And this person posted up these billboard signs. Where, I don't know exactly, but they got money to post. This is what I'm trying to tell you about fans. These fans go to some extreme lengths. Look, they're literally telling Warner Brothers, hey, look. And they posted up, restore the Snyder. That's crazy. I don't even know where that is. That's just fucking crazy. DC's Nightmare says Snyder fans should see this as a good thing. No longer is the Snyderverse attached to Gunn's DCU or Hamada's Marvel DCU slot. Meaning the Snyderverse can be finished at any studio at any time. No more confusing what's canon and what isn't. Elseworld Multiverse, Snyderverse will be finished. This was to culture bases. James Gunn has officially replaced the Justice League to the Justice Gang in Peacemaker Season 2. On Tuesday afternoon, I sat down with Mike DeLuca and Pam Agley, co-chairs of CEOs of Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, for an hour-long discussion about power, taste, fear, and the future of film. Here's an excerpt. And Pam and Andy, for better or worse, you can't do our jobs or even be the jobs below us where you're gatekeeping for material and curating what gets brought up for green light consideration. You cannot do the job like you're afraid to get fired. If you act like that, innovation dies. You're just doing the job to protect yourself. And you end up making the same movie over and over again, and the consumer moves on. He is 100% correct. This basically summarizes why I think they were best fit to actually run DC. Literally, Warner Bros. Has the two execs who would run DC properly. Not James Gunn and Peter Safran. They get it. You know, as executives, they get it. It's so crazy. They wanted to fire these people. It's just, it's so insane. And they actually are lovers of movies, by the way. These two love movies. So it's crazy that these two people, I don't know how much backlash they get from the executives in Warner Brothers. I don't know. But it's like literally what they're saying makes sense to me. Now, I don't know if they're just talking that and they do something else. But the proof is in the pudding. They've gotten movies to be succeed. They got Barbie. They got Sinners this year. They had that Rocky movie. They had two sequels of the Rocky movie that was successful. They had so much movies they had successful. What they call it with Jason Momoa and Jack Black. I keep on forgetting the name of it. They've had a series of movies that were successful. They had a lot of failures too, but they have a series of movies that are successful. And the thing about it is, it's about innovative, novel ideas. It's about not just having sequels and all of that, but having things that have a certain standard to them. Okay, not all the movies are going to do well at the box office. You know, they're not big brand names, but a good chunk of them make some good money. I mean, even F1. F1's not a success. It's an original movie. It's not a success box office wise, but it might just break even by the end of its run. Nah, I don't think so. It's not gonna break even. But at least, you know, even though it doesn't make money, it's a quality film that got out there, you know, that might just make money in the long haul in terms of like home release, streaming, etc. You know, so you just never know with these things. So I think that or a break even at least. Maybe. I can't really say because again, once you say 300 million, you're talking about in excess of 750 million, you know, 750 million at least you have to make to try to break even, you know, and as a budget that is, all right. So it's tough. It's tough. We'll see. Brad Curran was correct, and he's going to continue to be correct for a long time to come. So that's what I got for you guys. I think I spent about 3 hours on this. Yes, I did. It was nice talking with you guys. I don't know if you guys have anything in the chat. Probably do. Let me have a look. Here we go. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I could see a whole set of discussion here that was in the chat. Unfortunately, I could not come back to you and respond. But you guys have a good one. I am Christ, I am disciple.